Hi, welcome back to Robert Reed's 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to pick up where we left off with Chapter 3, Character Races. A variety of cultures and societies populate the world of Dungeons & Dragons game, some made up of humans, but others made up of fantastic races such as elves, dwarves, and tieflings. Adventurers and heroes can arise from these various peoples. Your choice of character race provides you with a basic set of advantages and special abilities. If you're a fighter, are you a stubborn dwarf monster slayer, a graceful elf blade master, or a fierce dragonborn gladiator? If you're a wizard, are you a brave human spell for hire, or a devious tiefling conjurer? Your character race not only affects your ability scores and powers, but also provides the first cues for building your character's story. Racial traits. Each character race offers the following types of benefits. Ability scores. Your character race gives you a bonus to a particular ability score or two. Keep these bonuses in mind when you assign your ability scores. Speed. Your speed is the number of squares you can normally move when you walk. Vision. Most races, including humans, have normal vision. Some races have low light vision. They see better in darkness than humans do. See vision and light. Language. You start off knowing how to speak, read, and write a few languages. All races speak Common, the language passed on by the last human empire, and some races let you choose a language. Other racial traits. Other traits include bonuses to your skills, weapon training, and a handful of other traits that give you capabilities or bonuses that members of other races don't have. Racial power. Several races give you access to a racial power, which is an extra power you gain at first level in addition to the powers your class gives you. See page 54 for explanation of how to read power description. There's some cool artwork here. Dragonborns. Proud, honourable warriors, born from the blood of an ancient dragon god. It starts with a little box that has sort of a summary of different mechanics, I guess. It says racial traits. Starts with average height and average weight. Dragonborns are between 6'2" and 6'8", an average weight of 220 to 320 pounds. Your ability scores are a +2 to strength and a +2 to charisma. That's some strong stuff. They'd make very good paladins, I guess. Size of medium, speed of 6 squares, and a vision of normal. Interesting that it gives you 6 squares and not 30 feet. Languages you speak is Common and Draconic. Skill bonuses you get is a +2 to history and a +2 to intimidate. So, right off the bat, difference from 5e is that you are getting +2 floating bonuses. We don't have proficiency in history or proficiency in intimidation. It's just a flat +2. Also, they call it intimidate and not intimidation. Dragonborn Fury. When you're bloodied, you gain a +1 racial bonus to attack rolls. That's pretty cool. So if you're less than half health, your attacks get more accurate. Draconic Heritage. Your healing surge value is equal to 1/4 of your maximum hit points plus your constitution modifier. God damn. So you can just heal up easier with your healing surges. You only need 3 healing surges and you're back to full, pretty much. Dragon Breath. You can use Dragon Breath as an encounter power. And then it goes on to explain what Dragon Breath is. As you open your mouth with a roar, the deadly power of your draconic kin blasts forth to engulf your foes. Encounter, I think, is like when it's telling you how often you can use it. You can use it once per encounter. And then your breath recharges before the next encounter. Acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison. So you choose one of those 5 types, and that's your breathed weapon. It's a minor action to use, which I think they would now call a bonus action. It's a close range, a blast 3. I don't really know what blast 3 means. Maybe it means it's 3 squares, or maybe it means that you choose someone. Maybe it means you just choose 3 people that are all close with each other. I'm not sure. I'd have to look up We'll eventually get there. Targets. All creatures in the area. So close blast 3. So close must be a number of squares away that you can count from you. And then blast 3 must mean choose a radius of that and then go 3 out from there. And it'll target all creatures in the area. But it should be a cone, surely. I don't know. Don't know how they target their whatever. Blast 3 is a 3x3 square. Okay. So you choose a 3x3 square in close radius, whatever close means. Balance between the classes as well as the basic premise that allows everyone to do all the cool stuff from the get-go, even at low levels, as well as have a lot of tactical variety at hand, even for martial classes, compared to the barbarian making a basic melee attack 5 turns in a row, as in 5e, without anything else happening except a rage. Yes, I see what you're saying. I think close means centered on or in contact with you. That makes sense. So you just go a 3x3 square that is somehow connected to me. I'm going to measure it out from this one and 2 squares that way, and then blast out that way. Did you note that on the first level, every PC adds the value of their constitution, not their mod? Oh, the value of the constitution. I don't think I've gotten to that point yet. Did it say, was it in the previous page? I don't think we've talked about we haven't gotten like hit points or anything yet. Okay, so to attack with your dragon breath, it's strength +2 versus reflex, constitution +2 versus reflex, or dexterity +2 versus reflex. So you can choose which of your three. Why does it do strength, constitution, dexterity in that order? That's weird. For characters already heroic and can take a lot of punishment. That makes sense. I read about HP in the first episode. Oh, gotcha. That was back in chapter 2, was it? So you add your constitution score to your hit points. Not your constitution modifier. Damn, everybody starts with a lot more hit points. In the Draconic Heritage Healing Surge, it was maximum hit points plus constitution modifier, though. Alright, your hit. If you hit with your Draconic Breath weapon, it is a d6 plus your constitution modifier in damage. So not a lot of damage. That's an average of probably around 6 damage to everybody, which, is not bad for an area of effect if you can get a lot of people in that 3x3 area. It increases to a +4 bonus and 2d6 plus constitution modifier damage at 11th level. That's much better. And a +6 bonus and 3d6 plus constitution modifier damage at 21st level. Yeah. At 21st level, I would want to be doing more than 12 damage from my Dragon Breath weapon. Special. When you create your character, choose Strength, Constitution, or Dexterity as the ability score you use when making attack rolls with this power. You also choose the power's damage type, Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Poison. These 2 choices remain throughout your character's life and do not change with the power's other effects. That makes sense. Born to fight, Dragonborn are a race of wandering mercenaries, soldiers, and adventurers. Long ago, their empire contended for worldwide dominion. But now only a few rootless clans of these honourable warriors remain to pass on their legends of ancient glory. Play a Dragonborn if you want... ... to look like a dragon, to be the proud heir of an ancient fallen empire, to breathe acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison, to be a member of a race that favours the warlord, fighter, and paladin classes. Physical qualities. Dragonborn resemble humanoid dragons. They're covered in scaly hide, but they don't have tails. They are tall and strongly built, often standing close to 6.5 feet in height and weighing 300 pounds or more. Their hands and feet are strong, talon-like claws with 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand. A Dragonborn's head features a blunt snout, strong brow, and distinctive frills at the cheek and ear. Behind the brow, a crest of horn-like scales of various lengths resemble thick, ropey hair. Their eyes are shades of red or gold. Interesting. They're kind of amalgamating all of the Dragonborn looks into the same, regardless of your heritage, which dragon you were born from. A typical Dragonborn's scales can be scarlet, gold, rust, ochre, bronze, or brown. Rarely do an individual's scales match the hue of a chromatic or metallic dragon, and the scale colour gives no indication of the type of breath weapon a Dragonborn uses. I don't really like that. Most Dragonborn have very fine scales over most of their body, giving their skin a leathery texture, with regions of larger scales on the forearms, lower legs and feet, shoulders and thighs. Young Dragonborn grow faster than human children do. They walk hours after hatching, reach the size and development of a 10-year-old human child by the age of 3, and reach adulthood by 15. They live about as long as humans do. That's a pretty slow down period between 3 and 15. If you're a 10-year-old human child at the age of 3 as a Dragonborn, and you're the equivalent of a 20-year-old by 15, that's something slowed down in that part of the development. Playing a Dragonborn. To a Dragonborn, also weird that they live as long as a human do. Like, what? They should live longer than a human does because they're dragons. They're descended from dragons. They should live hundreds of years. Probably. I guess Dragonborn puberty is hard. Yeah. Chapter 2 says to add a constitution modifier. I think maybe whoever it was that was saying constitution score is mistaken. Don't Dragonborns look like Hamish? Yeah. All Dragonborns look like Hamish. Playing a Dragonborn. To a Dragonborn, honour is more important than life itself. First and foremost, honour is tied to battlefield conduct. Adversaries should be treated with courtesy and respect, even if they are bitter enemies. Caution and discretion are key to a warrior's survival, but fear is a disease and cowardice is a moral failing. The drive to behave honourably extends into the rest of a Dragonborn's life. Breaking an oath is the height of dishonour, and attention to honesty extends to every word. A commitment made must be carried out. Ultimately, a Dragonborn takes responsibility for his or her actions and their consequences. A continual drive for self-improvement reveals an additional aspect of Dragonborn honour. Dragonborn value skill and excellence in all endeavours. They hate to fail, and they push themselves to extreme efforts before they give up on something. A Dragonborn holds mastery of a particular skill as a lifetime goal. Members of other races who share the same commitment find it easy to earn the respect of Dragonborn. The Dragonborn dedication to honour and excellence sometimes leads others to view Dragonborn as arrogant and proud. Most Dragonborn share a great pride in their race's past and present accomplishments, but they're also quick to admire the accomplishments of others. Even though the Tiefling Empire of Baal Turath was the enemy of the ancient Dragonborn Empire of Arcosia, Dragonborn recognized Tieflings as worthy companions or opponents, admiring their strength and tenacity as friends or enemies. Dragonborn seek adventure for the chance to prove their worth, win renown, and perhaps become champions about whom stories will be told for generations. To win everlasting glory through mighty deeds, daring exploits, and supreme skill, that is the Dragonborn dream. Dragonborn characteristics. You are driven, honour-bound, noble, perfectionist, proud, reliable, reserved, rooted in ancient history. I don't know if it's saying these as like reminders that you should be role-playing it this way, or whether they're saying this to be like choose one or two of these things to be role-playing. I don't know if it's like all or just a couple. I haven't made a decision yet about whether I like this, because it feels kind of prescriptive to say that an entire race of people, an entire species of people, are this way. To be driven, honour-bound, noble, perfectionists, proud, reliable, blah blah blah. That doesn't feel like it's tied to biology. That feels like it's tied to culture. If you are raised in a Dragonborn culture, you are these things. I'll probably come back to this a lot because it's something I've talked about a lot. But I feel like earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons, including 5th edition actually, have this problem of conflating biology and culture of your races. And I feel like they should split them in two, and you choose which species you're a member of and which culture you were raised in. So most people will be a dwarf raised in dwarven culture, and they'll just read the dwarf as is. But if you're playing a dwarf raised in raised in an elven village, or an elf raised in the wilderness, or a human raised by gnomes, etc., etc., you should have the Dragonborn characteristics of the Dragonborn because you were raised by a Dragonborn. You know, like so. If I was playing a human raised by a Dragonborn clan, I would look at this and go, okay, I should be driven, honor-bound, noble, perfectionist, proud, reliable, reserved, and rooted in ancient history. Those are the things. Those are the things that are how Dragonborns are. It also feels a little bit like an entire culture is just one thing. Like there's no Dragonborn cultures that are not driven or honor-bound or noble. I don't know. Like character building for dummies, spelling out every element and leaving little room for imagination. Yeah. Yeah. I like the world building aspect of it. I think that's where I'm landing. I like the idea that the designers have thought about the cultures a lot and thought about what the differences are. Because what I don't like about the direction D&D's going is the homogenization of all of the different species and classes and things. Everything seems like they're getting closer and closer to just being the same thing. Like the removal of the ability score improvements from your species kind of bothers me, because now you can be just as strong as a hobbit as you are as a Goliath, which irritates me. I like that. I like when your choice of race makes a difference. I like that. I like the idea that if you are choosing to play an elf wizard, you are saying something at level 1 that is different to if you'd played a dwarf wizard or a human wizard or a dragonborn wizard. Like I want those to feel different, not just in your mechanics of what you can do, but how you play it, how you role play it. I play in a private game called The Seekers, and one of the players of that game is playing a lizard folk, and he is one of the best role players I've ever had the joy of playing with, because he understands fundamentally what it means to be a lizard folk, and that pervades all of his choices. He acts in a more, everything that you know about lizard folk, he acts in a more his decisions as a character are always more based on like fundamental survival instincts and things, and he doesn't fully understand those higher level sarcasms and stuff like that. And it's not done on just like I'm too dumb to understand it. It's more of my brain is wired such that I cannot understand it because I have lizard brain. And it's even funnier because he has, as part of his story, he died and somebody cast the reincarnation spell, so he was brought back to life. But he's now in the body of a high elf, but he's still got the mind of a lizard folk, and so he's a high elf that is dealing with emotion now because his body is now capable of feeling emotion and stuff. And he plays it wonderfully of like this weird balance of like being somebody with a lizard brain, but now trapped in a body where he is capable of higher level thinking, and I think that's what I strive for in my games. Like your race, your choice of race should matter to how you choose to play, but it should also account for like your background. Like how were you raised? You wouldn't act like an elf further than what your biology dictates. You wouldn't act like an elf if you were raised by dwarves. I think you're totally right about separating race and culture, because we're talking D&D races. It's not like we're talking about ethnicity. Yeah, we're not talking about we're talking about genetic biological differences. There'll be differences in abilities, like difference in ability between a human and a dog. Exactly, yeah. If we're about to make a stat block for Tarzan, human stats, gorilla culture. Exactly that, yes. Hello, Rob. Dropping by to say I think you created a great game for the VLDL boys and that horror TTRPG. Thank you very much. The build up to the castle, the introduction of the monsters with the boys' reactions, very funny. Never played such games, but you made me want to. Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Could see those traits as cultural traits as opposed to everyone automatically having those traits. Yeah. things like Dragonborn breath weapon and your Dragonborn heritage. Those would be, in my games, I would put those in physical qualities that you only get if you're playing a Dragonborn. Whereas, for instance, the Dragonborn Fury, when you're bloodied, you gain a +1 racial bonus to attack rolls. I could see that as either. If it's something that like a fight or flight natural instinct of adrenaline or whatever that comes from your body, that once you are in a dangerous situation and likely to die, suddenly this kicks in and you get a +1 to your attack rolls. I could see that as being a Dragonborn species trait. I could also argue it's a Dragonborn culture trait of like their desire for perfectionism, for instance. Like you start to lose the fight and you instantly kick into being like, no, I will not lose this because I'm too proud, I'm too honor bound, I'm too noble, I'm too driven. I'm too driven to lose, so I will get better as I'm getting worse. So as I'm getting worse, I'm getting better at attacking to balance the scales. So like you could argue for things like that could be either. But things like the Dragonborn breath weapon, you can't really argue that that's a cultural thing, that's a species thing. Baseline culture that's impacted or driven by biological impulses that are inherent in those species. Yes, yeah. A mix of Danish, Canadian, and Welsh. Can't just fit into one cultural personality. Yeah, and obviously, like, if I was... So when I am, probably I should start saying whens rather than ifs, because one day it's probably inevitable that I'll make my own, like, Robert Hartley GM D20 system. When I eventually create something, I'll probably have you choose your ancestry, so what species you are, your background, including what culture you were raised in, and then your class after that. So your background will include what culture you were raised in, get a bunch of like Dwarven culture or whatever, but you can choose probably from all the different species that are on offer, like which ones you're raised in. And then there'll be other ones of like mixed, like traveler. So like somebody who traveled a lot between those cultures, and it'll be like you'll probably get some specific stats for having been exposed to a lot of different cultures over the year. Maybe you spent a couple of years in an elven village, and then it was raided and you were forced to move on, and you ended up settling by some Goliath clan, and then you spent years on the road just traveling as a hermit, and then you spent some time in some hobbit village, and like that background choice will probably come with like its own stats and things as well. So somebody who's spent a lot of culture with Danish, Canadian, Welsh, it would probably be something similar. At that point, you randomize personality traits, since no culture or race is that homogeneous, I think is how you say that. Drives me insane whenever a whole ass planet in Star Trek acts. Yeah, they go down to a planet in Star Trek and they're like, oh, this is the Chicago gangster planet. Like, oh, that entire thing was that. The entire planet's just that, is it? How you add all the mechanics you want without it just being as complicated as Pathfinder. It probably will be as complicated as Pathfinder. I like the crunch in my games. Do I start with a background when building a character? No, I usually start with a class. Personally, I usually just look at, if somebody's asking me to join a game, I'll go, what's needed? Because I've played all the classes and enjoy them all pretty much. So if they're like, oh, we don't have a healer, I'll look at the healer classes and be like, okay, I'll play a healer, and then I'll think back to who's the healer going to be then. Are we playing an all-human campaign? No? Okay, I'll probably be a fantasy race because they're more interesting and exciting than humans, maybe. Alright, then it gives you... Then after Dragonborn characteristics, it gives you some choices for male and female names for Dragonborns, like Arjan, Balasar, Barash, Donar, Patrin, Torin, Akra, Biri, Sora, Kava, Corin, etc. Dragonborn adventurers. 3 sample Dragonborn adventurers are described below. Barash is a Dragonborn warlord who leads a group of adventurers in search of riches and glory. Inspired by tales of the ancient heroes of Arcosia, he seeks his destiny in battle. He dreams of someday leading a mighty army against an orc horde or a hobgoblin host, but he is content in the meantime to coordinate strikes against the lesser forces of evil he encounters in dungeons and ruins. He reveres Bahamut as the god of honor. Haran is a fighter dedicated to the mastery of her chosen weapon, the bastard sword. She rises early every morning to practice combat maneuvers and constantly strives to master new techniques. Excellence with her weapon is symbolic to her. It represents excellence of character, the perfection of her spirit. When she's achieved perfect mastery of the bastard sword, she believes she'll be a perfect herself. Donar is a paladin of Erathis, the god of cities and civilizations. He believes that the Dragonborn race is destined to rise from the ashes of its ancient empire and to form a new nation carved from the wilderness. And he intends to be instrumental in that process. As a reminder of his heritage, he keeps a piece of the shell from which he hatched in an amulet around his neck. Although sometimes he thinks that pillaging dungeons is a waste of his effort, he occasionally unearths a remnant of a long-lost Dragonborn empire. He believes he can put such items to use one day in forging a new empire for his people. Alright, that was Dragonborns. 40 Dragonborns. Dwarfs. Moving on to dwarves now. Masters of stone and iron, dauntless and unyielding in the face of adversity. Their racial traits: they are between 4'3" and 4'9" on average. They have an average weight of 160 to 220 pounds. They get a +2 constitution and a +2 wisdom, which is pretty good for everybody because wisdom saves and con saves are both very frequent in the game. And your... let me think. What would be a wisdom everybody benefits from constitution because it's hit points. And then wisdom based classes, so druids and things. Druids, rangers, clerics. Clerics are often frontliners. Druids are as well, so you'd probably be a good frontliner cleric or druid with dwarves. Size medium, speed 5 squares, vision low light. Languages common and dwarven. Skill bonuses: +2 to dungeoneering. That's a skill we haven't seen in 5e. And a +2 to endurance, another skill we haven't seen in 5e. I wonder why they got rid of them. Your features are cast iron stomach. You get a +5 racial bonus to saving throws against poison. Dwarven resilience. You can use your second wind as a minor action instead of a standard action. That's pretty good. Dwarven weapon proficiency. Wait a minute. Second wind. So you get something called healing surges, but you also get second wind. I thought those were the same thing, because in D&D 5e, second wind is the healing surge for fighters. So I don't know what second wind is. Dwarven weapon proficiency. You gain proficiency with the throwing hammer and the warhammer. That's one of the things that I would separate out into Dwarven culture, because there's nothing about your Dwarven heritage that would tell you how to use a hammer. That's about how you were raised. Encumbered speed. You move at your normal speed even when it would normally be reduced by armor or a heavy load. Other effects that limit your speed, such as difficult terrain and magical effects, will still affect you normally. So being encumbered doesn't affect your speed, is all that that's saying. Stand your ground. When an effect forces you to move through push, pull, or slide, you can move one less square than the effect specifies. This means an effect that normally pulls, pushes, or slides a target one square does not force you to move unless you want to. It's pretty sturdy little thick dwarf. Fucking thick. In addition, when an attack would knock you prone, you can immediately make a saving throw to avoid falling prone. That's very cool. I like that. That's something that I would steal for dwarves in 5e. I don't know why they got rid of it. You are steady. You are sure-footed. Is Rackham here? What up, Rackham? How's it going? Healing Surge exists in 5e as an optional rule in the DMG. It's like Second Wind, but for everyone. So then why are they calling it Second Wind? I don't hear no bell. Carved from the bedrock of the universe. Good God. Dwarves endure a... Carved from the bedrock of the universe, dwarves endured an age of servitude to giants before winning their freedom. Their mighty mountain fortress cities testify to the power of their ancient empires. Even those who live in human cities are counted among the staunchest defenders against the darkness that threaten to engulf the world. Play a dwarf if you want to be gruff, tough, and strong as bedrock. To bring glory to your ancestors or serve as your god's right hand. To be able to take as much punishment as you can dish out. And to be a member of a race that favours paladin, cleric, and fighter classes. Interesting. Cool. It'd be a good idea to run D&D through the ages, first edition, second edition. I have that idea. I've had that idea for years, so I've never gotten around to doing it because it'd be a hell of a lot of work. But that's exactly the idea that I have GM Workshop, only in reverse. I had the idea to do through a Lich's Lair, and it's just taking you through the editions in its time dungeon. Pretty much exactly that, but in reverse. I had the idea to do a Groundhog Day style time loop where you start off in 5th edition, because that's the edition everybody knows. You make a character, and you play through a one-shot. And then at the end of the one-shot, some thing happens, and you time loop back to the start of that day, that week, whatever the time period of the journey is. And then the next session, you make the exact same character, but in 4th edition. And then you run through the exact same adventure, but in 4th edition. And you, as a way of highlighting what the differences are and the different traps and things, and how you would run traps and encounters and monsters and stuff. And at the end of that, you get sapped back to the start of the day, but now you make the exact same character in 3rd edition, and then 2nd, and then 1st. That's the idea that I have for one day, but it would require me understanding the rules of all of those different editions, and then finding the time to organise and run such an event, which would be fun, but it's so much work that it's kind of just put into the non-committed future. Should get various guest DMs to run the different versions. Maybe, but I don't. The idea of me doing that would be to highlight the differences of the editions, and the differences of making a character in those editions. I would want the highlight of the differences, the different versions, to be the change of edition each time, which as a scientist I'm inclined to remove as many variables as possible, which includes keeping the same players and the same dungeon master. I would want to be the one running it all, so that I can so that any differences between the sessions aren't falsely attributed to, that's just because so-and-so was running that session. The question, though, would be, do you change... I think I lost my train of thought. You wouldn't want to necessarily... It's difficult, though, because you wouldn't want to run the exact same dungeon, because even though the editions are changing, the location of the traps and the monsters would remain the same. And so some of the difficulty, you'd be like, oh, 1st edition's super easy. And it's like, oh, it's not. It's just that you happened to know where all the traps and monsters were ahead of time, so you prepared for it. So that would come into it. And then the other question is, do you include 3.5 and an advanced Dungeons and Dragons like AD&D? Or do you just go with base 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Do different levels of the same dungeon. Yeah, I think that's probably how I would run it. I maybe wouldn't make it a Groundhog Day after all. Maybe it would be just you start off you enter a dungeon, and like Rackham was saying, like a lich or some powerful monster at the very end that is able to manipulate time, or like a Androsphinx, Gynosphinx, I think is the... No, Androsphinx. Androsphinx, I think, is the more powerful one. The one that can manipulate time and like change the initiative order and stuff. Maybe put him at the end so that he's like a time lord, and you... I'll just make it Doctor Who. Make it the Time Lord. Yeah, whatever. Handwave some monster that's good with time and do like it's a 5-level dungeon, and as you enter the at the end of the first session, when you enter the elevator to go to the next level, you emerge as a level 4 as a 4E character or something. Anyway, that's all speculation and way off base of what we're meant to be doing today. Stop distracting me. Physical qualities. Dwarves average around 4.5 feet in height and are very broad, weighing as much as an adult human. Dwarves have the same variety of skin, eye, and hair colours as humans do, although dwarf skin is sometimes grey or sandstone red, and red hair is more common among them. Male dwarves are often bald and braid their long beards into elaborate patterns. Female dwarves braid their hair to show clan and ancestry. Dwarven attire and equipment, including weapons and shields, are decorated with bold, geometric shapes, natural gems, and ancestral faces. Although they reach physical maturity at roughly the same age as humans, dwarves age more slowly and remain vigorous well past 150 years of age, often living to see 200. That's a bit changed from 5e. In 5e, they live to like 350. In here, they live somewhere around 150 to 200, which I think I prefer. I think too many races live for too long in 5e. Playing a dwarf, proudly proclaiming they were made from the earth itself, dwarves share many qualities with the rock they love. They are strong, hardy, and dependable. They value their ancestral traditions, which they preserve through the ages as fiercely as they defend the carved structures of their mountain homes. Dwarves believe in the importance of clan ties and ancestry. They deeply respect their elders, and they honour long-dead clan founders and ancestral heroes. They place great value on wisdom and the experience of years, and most are polite to elders of any race. More so than most other races, dwarves seek guidance and protection from the gods. They look to the divine strength, hope, and inspiration, or they seek to propitiate? I've never heard that word before. Propitiate. Or they seek to propitiate cruel and destructive gods. Propitiate. I mean, from context, to strike down, or to forego, or to ignore, or to seek to propitiate cruel and destructive gods. This is why reading is good. Propitiate. The act of propitiating or appeasing a god, spirit, or a person. To atone? Propitiation? Propitiating? To win or regain the favour of by doing something that pleases them. So they do want to please the gods, the bad gods. Where was it? They look to divine strength for hope and inspiration, or they seek to propitiate cruel and destructive gods. So it's saying they can worship good or bad gods. So why is it different to worship? To win or regain the favour of by doing something that pleases them. To propitiate, to... There's another word for that. To appease, to... what's the word that I'm thinking of? There's a word that I thought is very similar to that. Maybe if I put thesaurus, it'll come up. Ingratiate? Is that the word I'm looking for? That's not quite the same. To ingratiate, because you ingratiate yourself with somebody. Placate? No, not quite. To propitiate. So to win the favour of somebody. The pagans thought it was important to propitiate the gods with sacrifices. Appease. Mollify. Make peace with. Conciliate. To win over. To win them over. To propitiate. To win someone over. To propitiate. Cool. Learning new words with Rob. They look to the divine strength for hope and inspiration, or they seek to propitiate cruel or destructive gods. Individual dwarves might be impious or openly heretical, but temples and shrines of some sort are found in almost every dwarven community. Dwarves revere Moradin as their creator, but individual dwarves honour those deities who hold sway over their vocations. Warriors pray to Bahamut or Kord, architects to Arathis, and merchants to Evandra, or even Tiamat, if a dwarf is consumed by the dwarven taste for wealth. Dwarves never forget their enemies, either individuals who have wronged them or entire races of monsters who have done ill to their kind. Dwarves harbour a fierce hatred for orcs, which often inhabit the same mountainous areas that dwarves favour, and which wreak periodic devastation on dwarf communities. Dwarves also despise giants and titans, because the dwarf race once laboured as the giants' slaves. They feel a mixture of pity and disgust towards those corrupted dwarves who have not yet freed themselves from a giant's yoke. Azers and Galabdurs among them. To a dwarf, it is a gift and a mark of deep respect to stand beside an ally in battle, and a sign of deepest loyalty to shield that ally from enemy attack. Dwarven legends honour many heroes who gave their lives to save their clan or their friends. All fantastic for, like, certain dwarven cultures, but I find it a little too prescriptive to say, dwarves hate giants! Like, maybe your dwarf doesn't. Dwarven characteristics. Acquisitive, brave, hard-working, loyal, organised, stern, stubborn, tenacious, and vengeful. Vengeful, okay. Then it gives a bunch of male names and female names, and then dwarf adventurers. 3 sample dwarf adventurers are described below. I don't really find that all of that interesting, so I'll just kind of skip this bit for brevity. I've got a lot to get through. This is 1, 2, and 3 dwarves that could be this, that, or the other. Not that interesting. I'm more interested in the mechanics of how they're different. Ugh. Elves? Oh no, these are Eladrins, that's why. I was like, these elves look fucked up. It's because they're Eladrin, and they do look fucked up. They look like they're poorly rendered, like N64 Ocarina of Time style sort of faces, where they don't really have depth. They're just... It's like they're rendered to be. It's like they're single, like smooth surfaces over their faces that have then been shaded to look like they've got depth to the faces. It's like some uncanny valley shit. Graceful warriors and wizards at home in the eldritch twilight of the Feywild. Eladrin. Interesting that you can play as an Eladrin in the PHB of the 4E. I find them to be a very rare race. I found, like in 5E, they're sort of touted as being this race that is pretty much exclusive to the Feywild. But they're just a straight up fundamental foundational race in 4E, I guess. Average height between 5'5" and 6'1", and weight between 130 and 180 pounds. You get a +2 dexterity and a +2 intelligence. So they'd make all sorts of good, like, graceful fighters, or a rogue would be very good as Eladrin, or wizards would be very good as Eladrins as well. That's their cantrip, facelifts. Yeah, Eladrin get a lot of work done. Eladrin education. You gain training in 1 additional skill selected from the skill list in Chapter 5. That would definitely be an Eladrin culture thing. Eladrin weapon proficiency. You gain proficiency with the longsword. A culture thing. Eladrin will. You gain a +1 racial bonus against to your will defense. In addition, you gain a +5 racial bonus to saving throws against charming effects. Those are definitely species-based things, because it's about how your brain is wired. Fey origin. Your ancestors were native to the Feywild, so you are considered a Fey creature for the purposes of effects that relate to the creature origin. It's your species only, I guess. Trance. Rather than sleep, Eladrins enter a meditative state known as trance. You need to spend 4 hours in this state to gain the same benefits of other races taking a 6-hour extended rest. Extended rest? 6 hours? Do they call long rests extended rests? Or is an extended rest a different thing to a long rest? While in a trance, you are fully aware of your surroundings and notice approaching enemies and other events as normal. That's your biology rather than your culture. And then Fey Step. You can use Fey Step as an encounter power, and it explains what Fey Step is next. With a step, you vanish from one place and appear in another. It's teleportation, it's an encounter-based thing, it takes your move action, and it is personal, so it can only be done on yourself, I guess. The effect is teleport up to 5 squares. See teleportation. Creatures of magic with strong ties to nature, Eladrin live in cities in the twilight realm of the Feywild. Their cities lie close enough to the world that they sometimes cross over, appearing briefly in mountain valleys or deep forest glades before fading back into the Feywild. Play an Eladrin if you want to be otherworldly and mysterious, be graceful and intelligent, to teleport around the battlefield cloaked in the magic of the Feywild, or to be a member of a race that favours the wizard, rogue, and warlord classes. Cool. Physical qualities. Eladrin are of human height. They are slim, and even the strongest simply look athletic rather than muscle-bound. They have the same range of complexions as humans, though they are more often fair than dark. Their straight, fine hair is often white, silver, and pale gold, and they wear it long and loose. Their ears are long and pointed, and their eyes are pearly and opalescent orbs of vibrant blue, violet, and green, lacking pupils. Eladrin can't grow facial hair and have little body hair. They lack pupils. Oh, yeah. I wonder how they see then. I wonder what their eyeball anatomy is. See, this is the sort of shit that I can't get past. If I'm doing world building for my game, for instance, and I decide, oh, a creature doesn't have pupils, then I would probably end up going on a whole deep dive into how the various different eyeballs work in real life, because eyeballs have evolved like 10 different times in the real world. There's like all sorts of different origins of the eyeballs. That's why we've ended up with these like compound eyes and eyeballs like we have, and then what do they call them? The photosensitive spots that are on certain creatures that basically are eyes, but just basically good for shadow. Like Tuataras have a third eye on the top of their head, but it's only good for light and dark, essentially. It just tells when there's shadow overhead. Eyeballs have evolved all sorts of places, so I would probably want to look into how eyes would work without pupils, and then I'd go into the anatomy of all of that shit, and then I'd end up deep diving and getting all sorts of information and lore about stuff that I'm probably never going to use. Horse eyes, goat eyes, cat eyes, octopus eyes, yeah. I know the octopus eye is different to the human eye. I mean, all those other ones you mentioned, horse, goat, and cat, they all look different, but they all evolved from the same origin of human eyes, mammalian eyes. But octopodes' eyes would have evolved differently because they don't have a blind spot. Our eyeballs are kind of inside out accidentally, just by nature of evolution does not have to get something perfect. It just has to get something good enough. And the way that our eyes evolved is good enough because we can see pretty well, and we can see well enough to avoid predators and find prey. Whereas the problem is all of the nerves of the retina are connected to the optic nerve on the inside of the eye, and then the optic nerve is now on the inside of the eye and needs to somehow get out of the eye to get to the brain, and so it passes back through a point of the retina. And because it has to pass through that point of the retina, there is no rods and cones on that little part of the retina, obviously, because that's the tube that's passing out to the brain. And so we have a blind spot in both of our eyes. And it's good enough because the blind spot in one eye is covered by the sight that we can see from the other eye. But you can find where the blind spot is there's all sorts of tests online of like you can look at a dot at a specific distance from another dot, and you can see that the other dot it just disappears. And your brain is filling in, like, I can't see something in this area, so I take information from everything around that area and I extrapolate and assume what is in that area, and it's very good at doing that. But if it's just a dot and there's no extra information for it, your brain can't extrapolate, so it just takes the white that's around the dot and just extrapolates to say the entire thing's white. So we don't necessarily know that we have a blind spot. Whereas octopus eyes are the other way around because they evolved differently. They just happened to evolve with the retina sort of the other way around, as it were. The information hits the rods and cones of the retina and then goes to the optic nerve that's already on the outside of the eye, and then they don't have to pass through themselves to get to the brain. It's another of the arguments against intelligent design, because it's like the more you look into the human body, the less intelligently it looks to have been designed. There's all sorts of issues with the way that our body is designed. So yes, I'm instantly, I hear that Eladrin have no pupils, and I go, well, then how do they see? How does light get to the light sensitive sensors in their eyeballs? Because octopodes are aliens. Yeah, octopodes nuts. Eladrin cannot grow facial hair and have little body hair. Eladrin children grow much as Eladrin children grow much as human children do, but their aging process slows to a crawl when they reach maturity. They enjoy youth and health for most of their lives, and don't begin to feel the effects of age until middle of their third century. Most live for over 300 years, and even at the end, they suffer few of the infirmities of old age. So then why do they die? Because people don't reach an age and then die. They die because of the infirmities of old age. They die because there's no such thing as actually just dying of old age. There's dying of some sort of organ failure based on the fact that your organs have just worn out over time. So if whenever a fantasy race doesn't die of old age, I go, why do they die then? Obviously, you could just hand-wave in a magical fantasy setting of like, yeah, the gods, when they created that race, decided you don't live past 800. You should get to 800 and die. Well, when I'm a quadruped, the human back can get a pass. Yeah, exactly. Logan's Run. all Eladrin are just Logan's running it. Maybe it means something like cats or horses, where they often completely okay and then get sick and die within weeks. Yeah. I would probably rule it that way as well, like to say that they do suffer the infirmities of old age. It's just not spread out over decades. It's probably just when they start to notice the degradation of their cells, and they start to notice the infirmities of old age coming on, they'll be dead within a couple of years. So it's rare to find a very elderly looking Eladrin, because they don't get elderly around 60 and then just live on for another 40 years. There's an episode of Deep Space Nine where an NPC type character has a theory that people only die because their cells get bored, so he's building a cellular entertainment chamber. That's funny. It takes about 100 years for us to die of oxidation. You're 28 until you're 72, and then you're 87. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of summarizing Financia. Eladrins are the same age as human children until they're in the mid-20s, and then they stay in their mid-20s until they're in the mid-70s, and then suddenly they're in their mid-90s. Playing an Eladrin. I have to find a way to hold this book. Playing an Eladrin. Eladrin society straddles the boundary between the Feywild and the natural world. Eladrin build their elegant cities and towers in places of striking natural splendour, especially where the veil between the worlds is thin. Isolated mountain vales, green islands along the wild and storm-wracked coasts, and the deepest recesses of ancient forests. Some Eladrin realms exist mostly in the Feywild, only rarely touching the world, while others appear in the world at sunset each day, only fading back into the Feywild at dawn. Long-lived and strongly tied to the Feywild, Eladrin have a detached view of the world. Eladrin often have difficulty believing that events in the world have much importance to them, and they consider courses of actions that can last for centuries. Their general detachment from the world can make Eladrin seem distant and intimidating to other races. Their fey nature also makes them simultaneously alluring and a little frightening. However, Eladrin take friendships and alliances to heart and can react with swift fury when their friends are endangered. Combined with their intellect, bravery, and magical power, this loyalty makes them powerful and respected allies. Eladrin live by an aesthetic philosophy common to the Feywild and personified by Corellon, the god of beauty and patron of the Feywild. Eladrin seek to exemplify grace, skill, and learning in every part of life, from dance and song to swordplay and magic. Their cities are places of stunning beauty that shape and guide their natural surroundings into elegant forms. Eladrin are close cousins to the elves, and are occasionally called High Elves or Grey Elves. Interesting. So the High Elves are Eladrin? Are they blending the boundaries between elves and Eladrin here? Eladrin favour the Feywild and arcane magics more than elves do, but the two races hold each other in high regard. They share a burning hatred for the third branch of their race, the Drow. Interesting. So, what I'm thinking here is that Eladrin used to be a name for High Elves, then what they're calling elves, they then called Wood Elves. So the three different types of elves, Wood Elves, High Elves, and Drow, are different species in this game. Entirely different races. So it's not a subspecies of each other. That's interesting. Because what I've noticed so far is they haven't done subspecies. They didn't do subspecies of dragon because they just had you pick a breath weapon. They didn't do subspecies of dwarves, no hill dwarves, no mountain dwarves, just dwarves. And then instead of doing elf and then picking high elf, you just pick Eladrin. This is making sense now. Interesting that they kept a hold of Eladrin then when they moved to 5e. And they just made them even more fey, I guess. It might also be that they're just called High Elves, but it's technically incorrect, and they also have High Elves as a subrace of elves. Well, we'll see on the next page, won't we? The Feywild's most powerful Eladrin, called Noble Eladrin, becomes so infused with their realm's inherent magic that they transform into entirely new creatures. Those Noble Eladrin take on characteristics of the seasons and other natural phenomena. So what they call Noble Eladrin, they changed to just the Eladrin. They took Eladrin and made them High Elves. They took the Elves and made them Wood Elves, and then they kept the Drow as it was. I think that's what's happened. Eladrin characteristics. If you grow up in an Eladrin culture, you may be aesthetic, deliberative, detached, free, graceful, magical, otherworldly, patient, and perceptive. And then a bunch of names, and then 3 samples of some Eladrin adventurers. Alright, now, elves. And you can tell that the elves they have gotten as more of the wood elf variety. Elves, quick, wary archers who freely roam the forests and wilds. Racial traits, you're between 5'4" and 6 foot, 130 to 170 pounds, you get a +2 dex and +2 wisdom, size medium, 7 square speed, so you're quite fast, and low light vision. This is just 100% wood elf so far. You learn the languages of Common and Elven. Did Eladrin have their own language? Yeah, they have Elven. Common and Elven. You get a +2 nature and a +2 perception. Your weapon proficiency, you gain proficiency with longbows and shortbows. That's a cultural thing, I would say. Your Fey origin, you're native to the Feywild, so you're considered Fey. You have a feature called Group Awareness. You grant non-elf allies within 5 squares of you a +1 racial bonus to perception checks. That makes no fucking sense to me at all. Why would you... What? Why would you... Why? What? Why? What? You being a wood elf makes somebody 25 feet away from you a little bit more perceptive. 5% more perceptive. What's that about? What the fuck? Pheromones. Elven pheromones. Elphemones. It sounds differently. Sounds like some woman called Alpha. They're on their first because of the lack of pupil, so they're more perceptive. Yeah. As a wood elf, you control small drones that constantly feed information to your allies. They're really good at being disappointed of their teammates when they're not perceptive, so you just feel on edge the whole time, yeah. Trying harder so they don't get overshadowed by the elf. Yeah. I hate that. I hate that as a racial ability. That doesn't make sense. I also just generally don't like aura abilities because they're often forgotten about and they're pain in the ass to keep a track of and stuff. And You're constantly slowing things down by going, is he within 10 feet of me? Is he within 25 feet of me? He gets a +1 bonus. Also, does it stack? It doesn't specify whether it stacks, so I assume that if you're a party of elves, you've got 5 people in the party, and whenever you're within 25 feet of each other, you've all got a +5 racial bonus to perception checks. Or +4, I guess. Oh no, it says you grant non-elf allies. There you go. You grant non-elf allies within 5 squares of you a +1 racial bonus to perception checks. So you all get a +1 bonus. Still, it would stack if 5 of you were elves and the other one was a human. That human would now get a plus whatever I just said number to their perception checks, because it does stack, it sounds like. It just stacks for non-elf allies. People watch their backs more when wood elves are around because they live under canopies and are therefore considered shady. Good night, everybody. And therefore they're better than the elves. Yeah. Peer pressure perception. Yeah, they'd get a +4, +5 racial bonus to their perception checks from all of the stacked elves around them, and they'd actually be better at perception than the elves. It makes no sense. Get rid of it. Get rid. I'm glad they got rid of 5e. That makes no sense at all. Wild Step. You ignore difficult terrain when you shift, even if you have a power that allows you to shift multiple squares. Shifting. I'm not sure what shifting is. Is it like the Pathfinder 5-foot step? When you can, instead of using your move action, your entire move action, you can just go just like 1 square without it counting as a move. Is that a shift? Elven Accuracy. You can use Elven Accuracy as an encounter power. Alright, what is Elven Accuracy? With an instant of focus, you take careful aim at your foe and strike with the legendary accuracy of the elves. Encounter. It's a free action to do. It's a personal thing, and it allows you to re-roll an attack roll. Use the second roll even if it's lower. Which is fine, because if you're re-rolling, it's probably because you're missing. I suppose you could re-roll an attack that hits if you're really crit fishing. If you're in a situation where you're like, I need to crit this guy in order to win this fight right now, on this turn. It needs to be a crit, and a regular attack won't do. Then you could roll, and even if you roll a 19, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to use Elven Accuracy to re-roll and hope for that crit. And you could turn your hit into a miss. Basically, elves should all bring a token human along to crit all of the perception checks. Yeah, just if ever elves go out hunting, if ever elves go out in like a huge hunting group of like 20 of them, and they're all together within about 25 feet of each other, and then you just like walking forwards, just have one human at the very front who's getting like +20 to perception checks. Shifting is moving without opportunity attacks. Yeah, I figured that might be it. Yeah, or re-rolling if you're not sure if you've hit. So yeah, I suppose because it might be like the first attack of a fight, and you haven't worked out what the AC of the thing is yet, and you go, well, I'm going to assume a 12 will miss, so I'll re-roll it, and then have to use the lower of the two. Like bringing a dog for a fox hunt. Yeah, exactly. The elves all use humans. I love this. If I was playing 4E and I was using this group awareness thing, I would 100% now world build that all elves use one human like a dog in a fox hunt. He's only there to go, he's there. It points them out. He's there behind the tree. He's like a dog, but he can speak your language. And he speaks to you in common and tells you he's there, he's over here, you can see him over there, blah, blah, blah. And then after he points him out, the guy just sits there and the elves all rush off to grab him. They bring a pointer human. I like the unintentional world building that comes from finding loopholes in rules. I'm the greatest hunter in the world as long as my 20 elf friends are around. Doesn't need to be a human, could be a Dragonborn. Yeah, it could be anything. Could be any non-elf. Technically an Eladrin. That's why Paragon could hear the orcs and stuff miles off. Yeah, because what's his face? Legolas was giving him a +1 bonus to his perception. An Irish setter human, yeah. Wild and free, elves guard their forested lands using stealth and deadly arrows from the trees. They build their homes in close harmony with the forest, so perfectly joined that travelers often fail to notice they have entered an elven community until it's too late. Play an elf if you want to be quick, quiet, and wild, to lead your companions through the deep woods and pepper your enemies with arrows, or to be member of a race that favours ranger, rogue, and cleric classes. Physical qualities. The elves all go, good boy, Rob, good boy, and give him a cheeseburger as a reward. 100%. I love that. Oh man, I feel like if I was a different sort of content creator, that's probably how I'd come up with my like shorts and stuff. If I had the time, if I had like a costume room and like the time to actually film myself doing the sort of green screen cutaway shit that you see of the like the YouTubers like one shot questers and stuff. If I had the proclivities for that sort of dedication to a YouTube video, I'd do things like this. I'd read something, I'd find something that makes no sense, I'd highlight it by making a short of it. I'd be like, screenshot this, put it up, and be like, did you know this feature exists? And then act out a scene of me with elf ears on, being like, where are they? Good boy. You point them out. Where are they? Good boy. You got a +20 to your perception. Good boy. There they are. Good boy. Here's a cheeseburger. Some sort of game logic. But yeah, it'd be like a logic of D&D. What would we call it? Like D&D logic, I suppose. Wait a minute. Those D&D logic videos, unfortunately, would not work well with such specific things, because they would need to in the video they would need to start with an outline of what we're trying to poke fun at, and then make a skit poking fun at it. The D&D logic style of doing things is to poke fun at something that is already ubiquitous to everybody knows what I'm poking fun at before I poke fun at it. When are we fundraising for the studio? Because that's exactly the wacky content that I need. Yeah, mate. That's the next donation goal. We're going from YouTube editing to an entire studio for green screen and costumes for Robert. You're onto something here. Maybe find a production company who can help you. If only I knew someone who had a green screen and a huge studio full of costumes. Oh well. Maybe one day. Physical qualities. Elves are slender, athletic folk. Oh well, pipe dreams. Elves are slender, athletic folk, about as tall as humans. They have the same range of complexions as humans, tending more towards tan or brown hues. A typical elf's hair colour is dark brown, autumn orange, mossy green, or deep gold. Elves' ears are long and pointed, and their eyes are vibrant blue. Just thinking it's interesting that they say they're more likely to tend towards tan and brown hues, but the two elves that they show in the picture are white. Interesting choice. I suppose that guy looks more Italian than white. He's got a little bit of olive complexion, I suppose. But she's like not only white, she's like pale white. You gotta get the Viva guys to pay you to make content like that for D&D channel. Yeah, that'd be pretty fun. A typical elf's hair colour is dark brown, autumn orange, blah blah blah. Elves' ears are long and pointed, and their eyes are vibrant blue, violet, and green. They have little body hair, but they favour a wild and loose look to their hair. Elves mature about the same rate as humans, but show few effects of age past adulthood. The first sign of an elf's advancing age is typically a change in hair colour, sometimes greying but usually darkening or taking on more autumnal hues. Most elves live to be well over 200 years old and remain vigorous almost to the end. That's interesting, because in 5e they live like 700 years. And in 4e they live like 200. That's fascinating. And high elves live over 300. Big difference between the wood elves and the high elves. Very interesting. Elves are a people of deeply felt but short-lived passions. They are easily moved to delighted laughter, blinding wrath, and mournful tears. They are inclined to impulsive behaviour, and members of other races sometimes see elves as flighty or impetuous. But elves do not shirk responsibility or forget commitments. Thanks in part to their long lifespan, elves sometimes have difficulty taking certain matters as seriously as other races do. But when genuine threats arise, elves are fierce and reliable allies. Elves revere the natural world. Their connection to their surroundings enables them to perceive much. They never cut living trees, and when they create permanent communities, they do so by carefully growing and weaving arbours, tree houses, and catwalks from living branches. They prefer the primal power of the natural world to the arcane magic their Eladrin cousins employ. Elves love to explore new forests and new lands, and it's not unusual to be loved by anyone for individuals or small bands to wander hundreds of miles from their homelands. Elves are loyal and merry friends. They love simple pleasures, dancing, singing, foot races, and contests of balance and skill, and rarely see a person tie themselves down to dull or disagreeable tasks. Despite how unpleasant war can be, a threat to their homes, families, or friends can make elves grimly serious and prompt them to take up arms. At the dawn of creation, elves and Eladrin were a single race, dwelling both in the Feywild and in the world, and passing freely between the two. When the Drow rebelled against their kin, under the leadership of the god Lolth, the resulting battles tore the Fey kingdoms asunder. Ties between the peoples of the Feywild and the world grew tenuous, and eventually the elves and Eladrin grew into two distinct races. Elves are descended from those who lived primarily in the world, and they no longer dream of the Feywild. They love the forests and wilds of the world that they have made their home. Elf characteristics, if you've grown up in an elven culture: agile, friendly, intuitive, joyful, perceptive, quick, tempestuous, and wild. That's not how I see elves, but yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. In 4E, there was probably a point of human uprising, and they wiped out a lot of the elf kids, dropping their average lifespan quite a bit. Yeah, that's probably what it was. That made sense when elves lived centuries or forever, but it doesn't really make sense they live such a different view of time with a 200-year lifespan. I thought I did think that as well, when it was like, due to their long lifespan, they sometimes have difficulty taking certain matters as seriously as other races. Not for 200 years. That's still close enough to 100 years that it's not like... If you live 700 years, then you think, this thing that's going to be going for the next, 40 years, yeah, it's a bit of an issue, but it's not that big of a deal. But a 40-year thing, a 40-year war, is going to be a significant portion of your 20-year lifespan. 200-year lifespan. Alright, so you're tempestuous, you're wild, you've got your male name options and your female name options, blah blah blah, and then your sample elven adventurers. Moving on. Half-elves. You thought we were done with the elves? No! We are not done with the elves. We're moving into half-elves. Born heroes and leaders who combine the best features of humans and elves. Your racial traits, you average between 5'5" and 6'2", 130 to 190 pounds. You get a +2 con mod and a +2 charisma mod. +2 to your con and a +2 to your charisma. Your size medium and speed of 6 squares, and your vision have low light vision. Languages, you speak Common, Elven, and your choice of one other. You get a +2 to diplomacy and a +2 to insight, diplomacy being persuasion, I think. You have a feature called dilettante. At first level, you choose an at-will power from a class different from yours. You can use that power as an encounter power. Any class different from yours? Interesting. An at-will power. So you can be a half-elf ranger and have an at-will encounter power of a barbarian or a rogue or a wizard or something. That's interesting. Because you're half-elf. Dilettante. Dual heritage. You can take feats that have either elf or human as a prerequisite, as well as those specifically for half-elves, as long as you meet any other requirements as well. Diplomacy. Group diplomacy. You grant allies within 10 squares of you a +1 racial bonus to diplomacy checks. This one makes more sense than perception checks, but still is a little bit meh. So now if you are 50 feet... If you are within 50 feet of a half-elf, regardless of what that half-elf is doing, it does not say that you have to be conscious in order to grant that effect, like it does with certain paladin auras and things. You could be within 50... It doesn't even have to say you have to be within line of sight. It just says 10 squares. So theoretically, you're 50 feet below a sleeping half-elf in a room upstairs, and you're slightly better at talking. You're slightly better at being a diplomat. Does that stack again? Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't say it doesn't, so I'm assuming it does. So you're in a situation... you're in an apartment block, like a barracks, where there's just like triple bunk beds, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of half-elves in this building with you within 50 feet. And there's just like a meeting room right in the center of this build. So you specifically design a part of your fortress when you're high enough level that you can just like have your own land. You create 100-foot tall, 100-foot wide, 100-foot long building. Huge, big castle-looking structure, 100 feet in each dimension. And in the very center of that building, 50 foot up, 50 foot down, 50 foot side to side, you have a meeting room, a very small meeting room with a table and a chair. And then in every other room in this entire building, you just stack in as many fucking bunk beds as you can. And you just get a shit ton of half-elves to just come and sleep and just hang out in this building. and then you meet with kings. You invite kings and diplomats and noblemen and royalty, and you invite them all over. and you meet with them, and you've got like a +200 to your diplomacy checks. Why is your diplomatic council room in the middle of your barracks? No reason. You'll find out. You'll find out. They don't sleep, they meditate. That's true, yeah. Just get them to come and meditate in the... Actually, no, that's not true. They are half-elves. They don't get the sleepy thing. Interesting. Actually, only the high elves do it. Even the elves don't. Even the elves have to sleep in 4th edition. I didn't pick up on that. Yeah, Eladrin get the trance thing. Rather than sleep, you can enter a meditative state. But wood elves and half elves, you have to sleep. Fascinating. Each sentence ends with a snore to accentuate the point. It's like the charisma ring check, but it's just some elves walking slightly nearby. Man, yeah. Group diplomacy. You grant allies within... And it also specifies allies this time. It does not specify non-half-elf allies. So you can also be a half-elf and already have a good diplomacy, I guess, and then get a +1 to your diplomacy because you're an ally. Also, are you an ally? In rules, in 5e, anything that applies to allies can apply to yourself because you are your own ally. And so there are features, there are some spells and stuff like bless and guidance and things that says you touch a willing creature, blah blah blah. And some people think that means not you, but it does. It means you are a willing creature. You are an ally. Is this a previous version? Yes, this is 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So if you grant allies and you count as an ally in the rules of 4th edition, you would get your own +1 racial bonus to diplomacy checks. Half-elves have excellent self-esteem, yeah. They can sleep, but can they get drunk? Diplomacy was, you can influence others with your tact, subtlety, and social grace. Make a diplomacy check to change opinions, inspire goodwill, haggle with a patron, or demonstrate proper etiquette and decorum, or negotiate a deal in good faith. I think that makes more sense than persuasion. Like, that's basically what you would use persuasion for. But I think diplomacy makes much more sense as a term for it than persuasion does. Because sometimes persuasion, you don't feel like persuading somebody, but you're still trying to influence them with your social grace or subtlety. Or your, whatever, your, what does it say, your proper etiquette and decorum. to understand. Like, if you are trying to act like you belonged at a regal ball or a banquet or something, it makes more sense to be like, roll me a diplomacy check to understand your recall of what is the proper etiquette, how should you behave, which knife should you use first. But asking for a persuasion check in those circumstances doesn't make any sense. If somebody in my game, in a 5e game, was sitting down at a royal banquet and was like, I describe, you've got kind of like Apis with the Feywild stuff, when you were eating a dinner at the Feywild, and it's like, you've got 4 forks on one side of your plate and 4 knives on the other and 4 spoons, and they present you with a type of stew-like thing, and you're like, do I eat with the spoon or do I eat with one of the forks? And and then you ask the dungeon master. If somebody asked me, can I roll something to see if I know which fork to start with? If I had a skill called diplomacy, straight to that one. Make me a diplomacy check, see if you'd recognize the proper etiquette. I wouldn't necessarily think to go make me a persuasion check. I would probably go make me a charisma-based history check. See if you know the history of how people have historically done eatings, but make it a charisma-based thing to know. Yeah, I don't know. We didn't have many skill checks when I played. Which edition did you play? Yeah, also make it a perception check or an insight check to see if you can recognize other people at the table and which forks they're eating with. Picks up the knife and stabs an archfey in the thigh. Interesting. Anyway, just making these little tangents of me making mental notes of, like, maybe in my game I call it diplomacy again, because I feel that makes more sense than persuasion. You want to be the only non-elf at the table then, so that you can get a lot of persuasion on picking up. A lot of perception on picking up which knife everybody's using. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like you get a hell of a lot from being a half elf, other than the dilettante feature, which is pretty strong. At first level, you choose an willpower from a class different to yours. Also, I've just sort of realized what I don't like about the group awareness and the group diplomacy things, is that you're getting a racial feature that you're getting from picking this race that doesn't apply to you, that doesn't affect, like, you would be pressured into playing this role because people at the table would be like, we don't have an elf yet. It'd be really good if you would play an elf so that we all get the bonus to your to the whatever. And it's like not something that you get to enjoy as a feature. Like, you're picking a class, you're picking a race, and then not getting the benefits of that race. Gotta go. No worries, Hannah. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I don't like that. I think your racial features should be stuff that, like, you can play with. You like toys that you have access to because of your choice. Anyway, whatever. Descended from elves and humans, half-elves are a vital race in which the best features of elves and humans often appear. Play a half-elf if you want to be an outgoing, enthusiastic leader, be a charismatic hero equally at home in 2 different cultures, or be a member of a race that favours the warlord, paladin, and warlock classes. Physical qualities. Half-elves tend to be sturdier of build than elves, but more slender than most humans. Half-elves have the same range of complexions as humans and elves, and like elves, half-elves often have eye or hair colours not normally found among humans. Male half-elves can grow facial hair, unlike male elves, even though it doesn't specify that in the male elf stats. It did in the Eladrin. Eladrin said they do not grow facial hair. But under elf, it says something about body hair. Elves have little body hair. Does not mention facial hair at all. Which I recognised at the time, and I was like, maybe elves can grow beards in this game. But then on the next page, under half-elf, it says, no, elves can't grow beards. Then say it in the elf stat block. Male elves can grow facial hair unlike male half-elves can grow facial hair unlike male elves and often sport thin mustaches, goatees, and short beards. Half-elves' ears are about the size of human ears, but they are tapered like the ears of their elven ancestors. Half-elves usually adopt the dress and hairstyles of the society they spend most time with. For example, a half-elf raised among barbaric human tribes dresses in furs and skins favoured by that tribe and adopts the tribe's style of braids and face paint. However, it would not be unusual for half-elves raised among humans to seek out articles of elven clothing or jewellery so that they can proudly display signs of their dual heritage. Half-elves have lifespans comparable to humans, but like elves, they remain vigorous well into old age. If you know what I mean. I kind of like that way of doing it. Being like, they don't live longer than humans, but they are virile and vigorous and young longer than humans. One thing before I forget, one thing that I really don't like about the way that 5e does races regarding half races is that it's always assumed that human is the other half, and it is a very human-centric way of thinking because the designers are humans, and so they're thinking of humans as the default at all times. And so even the name itself is half-elf, which I feel for anyone who was actually, if you do a little world building to the point of you put yourself in the position of some race of people that are born of humans and elves, it wouldn't take long for you to realise, oh, it would be very offensive to call myself a half-elf. Because I'm defining what I am by what I'm not. I'm saying I am only half of that. And there's no reference to humans at all. You are half elf and half human, so you're a half person. I really don't like it. Which is why in my games, half races all have their own names. So if you are a half elf, half human in my games, you are called a Bridden. And the people of the Bridden species, or it's not really a species because they don't propagate themselves. They're usually infertile in my games. They're a product of an elf and a human. But they don't have the ability to propagate themselves unless, without magic getting involved. But they're known as Briddens. And then, for instance, a half dwarf, half orc is a Sturrock, and a half human, half gnome is a gnomon, or a half hobbit, half gnome is a hobby? No, a nobby. Nobby, I think, is what they're called. So I've given them all names for the different races, and I don't just assume default that you're half elf means you're half human. If you're playing a half elf in my games, I ask you what's the other half. And there is very much a compatibility thing in my games as well. Like, you can't be half elf, half Dragonborn, because Dragonborn are evolved from reptilian folk and not mammalian folk, and you can't have one. You can't have a crossover. You can't be half elf, half fishman. It's just not going to work because the species are not compatible. There is a built-in rule in 4e that named bonuses do not stack with one another. So racial perception bonuses from an elf do not get better with the more elves. Damn! Thank you, Abaddon, for doing the research there. I did not know. Half elf, half dwarf. In my games, they would be known as Dwarf, I think. I think that was an earlier sort of stand-in word that I never actually came up with a better word for it. I haven't fully committed to what certain races are called, what certain crosses are called, because I know that I was going to be changing them. Like dwarf in my game is now called dwarg, and I haven't yet gotten around to renaming elves or humans or hobbits. Well, hobbits is hobbits. Half elves are the only multiracial people mentioned. Yeah. In this book, you can't play a half orc. Is it elevating the elf part? No matter what the other part is, you're half elf. You default to calling yourself that. Yeah, maybe. Like saying half white, no matter what the other half is. Yeah. It's an interesting one. No need for contraception? Yeah, no need for contraception if you're only fucking things of other incompatible species. If your only concern is that of pregnancy. and not anything else, any other reason for contraception. Half Orcs in another player handbook? Yeah, I figured they were probably released as a later edition or something. Where did I get to? Playing a half-elf. Half-elves are more than just a combination of two races. The combination of human and elf blood produces a unique race with qualities all of its own. They share some of the natural grace, athleticism, and keen perceptiveness of elves, along with the passion and drive of humans. But in their own right, they are charismatic, confident, and open-minded, and are natural diplomats, negotiators, and leaders. Half-elves like to be around people. The more diverse, the better. They gravitate towards population centres, especially larger settlements where members of many races mingle freely. Half-elves cultivate large networks of acquaintances, as much out of genuine friendliness as for practical purposes. They like to establish relationships with humans, elves, and members of other races, so they can learn about them, the way they live, and how they make their way in the world. Half-elves rarely settle down for any length of time. Their wanderlust makes them natural adventurers, and they quickly make themselves at home wherever they end up. When their paths take them back to a place they have visited before, they track down old friends and renew old contacts. Unfortunately, half-elves are survivors. Nope, I was like, why is that unfortunately? Ultimately, half-elves are survivors, able to adapt to almost any situation. They are generally well-liked and admired by everyone, not just elves and humans. They're empathetic, better at putting themselves in others' shoes than most. Half-elves naturally inspire loyalty in others, and they return that feeling with deep friendship and a keen sense of responsibility for those who place themselves in their care. Half-elf warlords and generals do not order their followers into danger that they would not face themselves, and they usually lead from the front, trusting their allies to follow. Half-elves have no culture of their own and are not a numerous people. They usually bear human or elven names, sometimes using only one name among elves and a different one among the humans. Some are anxious about their place in the world, feeling no kinship with any race except other half-elves, but most call themselves citizens of the world and kin to all. And then it gives characteristics and names, but it does not give elf character. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, no, it gives them. It does give names. It just doesn't break it down into male and female. Half-elf characteristics: accommodating, adaptable, charming, confident, gregarious, and open-minded. Share as a half-elf because she uses just the one name. And then a bunch of 3 sample adventurers. Blah blah blah. Not interested in that. Halflings! These do not look like halflings. Those just look like humans. That's an interesting choice of picture for the halflings. Quick and resourceful wanderers, small in stature but great in courage. They range between 3'10" and 4'2". That is way taller than a halfling. 4'2"? 4'2" halfling? The dwarves were between 4'3" and 4'9". So you could have a 4'2" halfling and a 4'3" dwarf with the same height. That's ridiculous. That's shorter than Bagel. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Bagel's like 2'6". Average weight 75 to 85 pounds. Get a +2 to bonus to dexterity and a +2 to charisma. Your size category small. So 4'2.5" is right the difference between small and medium apparently. Obviously it's more than that. It's about body bulk as well. You do not get dark vision as a halfling. That makes sense to me. You can speak common and your choice of one other language. You get a +2 bonus to acrobatics and a +2 to thievery. Now, sleight of hand is one opposite to diplomacy, where I think they did rename it in the good direction. I think sleight of hand makes much more sense than thievery, because sometimes you want to use a check that relates to how nimble and how much manual dexterity you have with your fingers, without it being related to thieving something. Alright, your features as a halfling, you get bold. You gain a +5 racial bonus to saving throws against fear. You get Nimble Reaction, a +2 racial bonus to armor class against opportunity attacks. That's interesting. So you're less likely to get opportunity attacks as a halfling. That's pretty cool. And Second Chance. You can use Second Chance as an encounter power. What is Second Chance? Luck and small size combine to work in your favor as you dodge your enemy's attack. It's an immediate interrupt, and its effect is when an attack hits you, you can force an enemy to roll the attack again. The enemy uses the second roll, even if it's lower. That is interesting. So you get a +2. So really, really good against getting out of dodge. You can move away from somebody, trigger an attack of opportunity. You have a +2 racial bonus to your armor class against it, and if they hit you and you haven't used it yet this encounter, you can interrupt to say, reroll that again. It would suck if you rerolled them and they went into a crit, because it does not say the enemy uses the lower roll. It says the enemy uses the second roll. So you could absolutely get hit and then reroll them into a crit. It does, however, mean you're almost never going to get critted. Except things that are automatic crits, like being paralyzed or asleep and stuff, if that's still a thing in 4E. Because if somebody hits you with an attack, and that attack is a nat 20, you can force them to reroll, unless you have used this encounter already, I guess. But the chances of being critted twice in one encounter is lower already. Half-ling? Sounds like they're only a quarter. That is one of the things that I don't like about the name. Again, similar to what I was saying before about half-elf being implications that you are half of something. Halfling implies that you are half of something else, and so you're being compared to that of a human. You're being like, oh, I'm only half the size of a human, so I'm only half the person, which I really don't like. Which is why I call them hobbits in my games, and halfling is a racial slur. And I call them hobbits in my games until the Tolkien estate comes at me and tells me cease and desist. Because maybe if I get big enough, one day they will do so. But I'm willing to take that chance. Halflings are a small race known for their resourcefulness, quick wits, and steady nerves. They are a nomadic folk who roam waterways and marshlands. No people travel farther or see more of what happens in the world than halflings. That is directly contradictory to what we think of as hobbits. They are stationary people who do not have wanderlust. They are homely, and they are great farmers, and they stay in one place, and and when one of them goes, I'm going on an adventure, it's a big fucking deal. Small race known for their blah blah blah, nomadic folk who roam waterways and marshlands. Fascinating choice. Fascinating. Also very similar to what they just said about half-elves. Yeah. Yeah, true. No race travels further or wider and sees more of the world than halflings. One page after they've just said the same about fucking half-elves. They have no culture of their own and are not a numerous people. They... something about travelling the world, and they feel no kinship with any race except other half-elves. They call themselves citizens of the world and kin to all. So they're nomads and wanderers, is what you're saying? Pick a half-elf pick a halfling if you want to be a plucky hero who is all too easy to underestimate, to be likeable, warm, and friendly, or to be a member of a race that favours rogue, ranger, and warlocks. And then there's a sidebar. Being small. Small characters follow most of the same rules as medium characters, with the following exceptions. You cannot use two-handed weapons, such as greatswords and halberds, and when you use a versatile weapon, such as a longsword, you must do it two-handed, but you don't deal the extra damage for doing so. So the only thing about being small is drawbacks to using bigger weapons. That's not good game design. Good game design is you can play this thing that's got detriment here, but it has a bonus to this. So then you've got a choice of like, oh, am I willing to give up on greatswords and two-handed weapons in favor of a bonus to my stealth or something? Interesting that they've also got 6 squares of movement though. So in this game they are faster than dwarves. They are smaller than, with shorter legs than, but faster than dwarves. Dwarves are just too slow and stocky, I guess. Too much inertia. If halflings are known to be underdogs, how do people not expect it? Yeah, how known for being an underdog do you have to be before you're no longer known for being an underdog because you're no longer an underdog? Physical qualities. Halflings stand around 4 feet tall and weigh 80 pounds. They resemble small humans and are proportioned like human adults. Halflings have the same range of complexions as humans, but most halflings have dark hair and eyes. Halfling males don't have beards, but many have long, full sideburns. Halflings of both genders often wear complicated hairstyles featuring complex braiding and weaving. Halflings typically dress in clothes that match their surroundings and prefer earthy tones and various shades of green. Their clothing and gear feature woven textures and stitching, birds, river patterns, and boats. Birds, river patterns, boats, and fish are common images in halfling art and decoration. Interesting that part is under physical qualities. The caption, the heading for this section is physical qualities. Birds, river patterns, boats, and fish are common images in their art. It's not physical quality, is it? Halflings have lifespans comparable to humans. Playing a halfling. Halflings are an affable, warm, and cheerful people. They survive in a world full of larger creatures by avoiding notice, or, barring that, avoiding offence. They appear harmless and so have managed to survive for centuries in the shadow of empires and on the edges of wars and political strife. Halflings are practical and down to earth. They concern themselves with basic needs and simple pleasures, harbouring few dreams of gold or glory. Adventurers are no more rare among halflings than among other races, but they usually pursue the adventurer's life for reasons of community, friendship, wanderlust, or curiosity. Halfling adventurers are brave and faithful companions, relying on stealth and trickery in battle rather than raw might or magic. Tight-knit halfling communities are found near the settlements of other races, often along or even on the surface of a body of water. Halflings have never built a kingdom of their own or even held much land. They don't recognise any sort of royalty or nobility of their own, instead looking to family elders to guide them. This emphasis on family and community has enabled halflings to maintain their traditional ways for thousands of years, unaffected by the rise and fall of empires. According to halfling legend, Melora and Sehanine created the halflings together, giving the race a love of nature and the gift of stealth. When their interest waned, Melora and Sehanine stopped looking after the race, or so the legends go, and halflings made their own way in the world. They say Avandra, the god of luck, admired their resourcefulness and adopted them, favouring them with good fortune. Not all halflings worship Avandra, but nearly all of them breathe a prayer of thanks to her when fortune favours them. Halflings are fond of stories and legends such as the myth of Avandra, and their culture is rich in oral tradition. Few members of other races realise that halfling folk tales contain the vast amount of lore about people and places long past. Many halflings are able to dredge up knowledge about the history, religion, and culture of other races, but that knowledge is usually wrapped in a fable. Characteristics: brave, curious, determined, down to earth, friendly, good-natured, lucky, nimble, optimistic, practical, resourceful, and warm. They're always warm. Hey, Dungeon Master, can I have resistance to this cold damage? Because it says, look here, halfling characteristics, warm. Alright, so we are on to humans. Humans. This is your human picture. Ambitious, driven, pragmatic. A race of heroes and also a race of villains. Average height between 5'6" and 6'2". Average weight 135 to 220 pounds. You get a +2 to 1 ability score of your choice. Only one? Every other race so far has gotten 2 +2s. And humans only get 1 +2. How bizarre. How bizarre. Size medium, 6 squares and normal. Languages common and choice of one other. You get a bonus at will power. You know 1 extra at will power from your class. Bonus feat. You gain a bonus feat at first level. You must meet the feat's prerequisites. You get a bonus skill. You get training in 1 additional skill from your class list. And you get a defense bonus, a +1 to fortitude, reflex, and will defenses. Now, this is interesting because this is kind of how humans are in all games ever. They're like, oh, they're the adaptable ones, so they just get a bunch of extra stuff that's just extras. It's kind of boring game design in that it's just like, yeah, you're human and you get a bunch of extra stuff that you're already getting, but one more. It's also hard to pass out between biological differences and cultural differences. And I understand why. And I think the reason why is that they call them humans. And this muddies the line between what these are and what we are. These are not the same as... This is a fantasy race in a fantasy game that is called human and has the appearance and anatomy and height and such of humans, real humans, but they're not real humans. They're a fantasy human. I think a lot of this problem is better if you just don't call them humans. In my games, I'm going to be, when I eventually get around to doing world building enough, I just don't have the fucking time for anything. I wish I just had the time to do all of the things I want to do, including just make world building my full-time job. I want to just sit down on Legend Keeper and actually finish the dwarves and start the elves and do the hobbits and the humans and stuff. I want to do that shit. I just never have the time to do it. But when I do, humans will no longer be called humans. They'll be called something else. Just to make it very clear to people, you're not playing a real-life person in a fantasy world. So you can get away from the awkwardness of going, this is how human culture is. And then people going, well, that's not how human culture is. You can get away from the awkwardness of going 5'6" to 6'2". What about me? I'm 6'4". I'm a human. D&D's telling me that I'm not a human. No, it's not. It's telling you that you're. It's not saying anything about you and your species. It's saying stuff about this fantasy race. This fantasy race has an average between 5'6" and 6'2". It's also not even saying that you can't be 6'6". You can. It's just you're above average. It's when I retire. Yeah, it's. I'm disappointed, but I understand that they have not put the work into going. Humans get these biological traits because all humans have this, and all humans have because they don't want to open that can of worms of going all humans are blah, because that's a very quick path to people being like, what about this culture in the Middle East, or what about this culture over in the Amazon rainforest, or those humans are different. They don't want to tar all humans with the same brush with too much stuff, and so they end up taking this like really safe but boring kind of approach to humans in video games and TTRPGs, where they go, humans are just good at everything, so you take a bonus language and a bonus skill and a bonus feat. In Skyrim, they make it pretty cool since they also made different races of humans and they get the different bonuses. Interesting. It's because they're based off the races of man, but they didn't want it to seem limited by sex. Human. It's like dungeon meshy humans called like tall men or something. I don't know how Star Wars does it, no? What do they call human-looking folks? Yeah, I think they call them... I think Luke is a human, but it's like... It's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. What will you call them? What will you call them? If I knew that, I'd be doing a world building stream. I'm not doing a world building stream. I'm not coming up with what I'm going to be calling them and having you fuckers hold me to it later. Schumans. But with a CH. Schumann. Human Schmooman. I'll call them Schmooman. Schmoomans. That just reminds me of the Moomins. Oh no, wait. I was about to get Moomins and Clangers mixed up. I was going to say living on the moon and speaking in whistles, but that was the Clangers. What were the Moomins? The Moomins were like little bipedal pig-like people, weren't they? It's not too dissimilar to like Peppa Pig in appearance, like they're long, pale animal things. Were they hippos? Were they hippos? That makes sense. Yeah. Kind of like humans can recover from shock, not always, but more often than most. Interesting. Eventually they made the humans master engineers in Star Trek. Yep. Giving bonuses to intelligence makes sense for humans, I think. I mean, Homo sapiens. Makes sense. Wise man. It's also the feeling that since people have a bunch of different cultures, everyone else should have just as many. Yeah. We'll all forget what you say, Pinky Promise. I'll give you 3 bits for the name. I don't have the name. It's not like I'm redacting a name that I've already thought of. I'm telling you I haven't gotten around to world building the humans in my games, so I haven't thought about what I'm going to call them. When I started on dwarves, I had to think about what do I want to call them, and I came up with dwarg, and I was like, yep, that fits. I will come up with something, a word for humans that are something to do with their appearance or mortalness or whatever. Their short lifespans comparative. Maybe something to do with their like burning, like the brightest fires burn fastest. The hottest stars are the ones that die soonest. The hotter the candle is burning, the shorter the time it has to before it runs out. I think of humans in the same way. They have a short lifespan, but they're burning the candles at both ends their entire, like they're striving for something throughout their whole lives. I think that's defining humans more than the other fantasy races in my games. So I would probably think about something like that. Look up words relating to like burning or fire or passion or drive, ambition. The ambitiousness of humans, I think, is one of the most defining characteristics of them. And so I'd probably look up words around that and stick it into a thesaurus, put it in different languages, put it in like an Old English language creator, like what is an Old English language word for ambition, and then I'd come up with something like that. Long goblins. Terrans, Furans. I don't know. I'm not fucking world building humans right now. Okay. Of all the civilized races, humans are the most adaptable and diverse. Human settlements can be found almost anywhere, and human morals, customs, and interests vary greatly. Play a human if you want to be decisive, resourceful hero with enough determination to face any challenge, have the most versatility and flexibility of any race, and be able to excel at any class you choose. Physical qualities. Oh boy, it must be warming up. He's taking the hat off. What? Physical qualities. Humans come in a wide variety of heights, weights, and colours. Some humans have black or dark brown skin, others as pale as snow, and they can cover the whole range of tans and browns in between. Their hair is black, brown, or a range of blondes and reds. Their eyes are most often brown, blue, or hazel. R.I.P. green-eyed people. Human attire varies wildly depending on the environment and society in which they live. Their clothing can be simple, ostentatious, or anything in between. It's not unusual for several distinct human cultures to live side by side in a particular area and mingle, so human armor, weaponry, and other items incorporate a variety of designs and motifs. Humans' average lifespans are about 75 years, though some venerable members of the race live as long as 90 or more. As long as 90 or more. So go as high as the or more part and say as long as that. I've always had a pedantic dislike of when things go as many as this or more, or as many as 7 plus. Like, what's the plus? You've said as many as, you're giving me an upper limit. You're starting with that sentence to say, oh, I'm about to give you the upper limit of the thing I'm describing, and then I give you an upper limit and then say it can be even more than that. Then what was the point of it? The most egregious example that comes to mind was in New Zealand. When I moved to New Zealand, you can drive on your English license here, English driver's license, for 1 full year. And then after I'd done so, I had held my license for 2 years. At that point, you don't need to do a driving test in New Zealand. You just need to do a theory test. Turns out I just went into the post office. They gave me a driver's license without doing a theory test. No wonder New Zealand drivers are the fucking shittest drivers I've ever met. Not exactly. That's hyperbole. But they are shit drivers here. Because they don't fucking test them. But I was preparing for my theory driving test that I, in theory, should have had. And one of the road code things about roundabouts said roundabouts can have anywhere between 2 and more than 4 exits. And I was like, roundabouts can have between 2 and more than 4 exits, so don't put a fucking between. And also, if it's got 2 exits, it's not it's just a fucking bend, or it's a road. You've just put a why would you put a roundabout in a thing with 2 exits? What do you do? What? It's just a road with a circle in the center that you have to drive around. It's just a turning point in the road. 2 and 4, more than 4. So it can have 117 exits on a roundabout, sure. So don't just roundabouts. Why? What is that paragraph saying? Take the entire thing out and you wouldn't lose anything. The cold is making you ragey again. The cold. I'm always fucking ragey. Allow magic to prolong human life in your words? Yep. Yeah, humans can live longer in my worlds than 90 if they with magic. With magic, anything's possible. It's like calling something very unique. If it's unique, then that's it. It cannot be more or less unique. It is unique. Yeah, it's like being very pregnant. I'm very pregnant. What? You either are or you aren't. There are 2 and 3 road roundabouts by me. Pointless. Well, 3 road roundabouts make sense. But 2 exits, like 2 roads that enter and exit the roundabout. There's not a lot of point to having that. Yes, it's speed reductions. It's a speed reduction loop. It's a speed reduction, and it gives a place for somebody to turn around. And often, sometimes there is a third entrance and exit onto the roundabout, but it's like a private thing, or it's like a roadworks entrance or something that is not an entrance to the public or whatever. So I can understand why they sometimes have two roads. It's just the concept of saying a roundabout can have between 2 and more than 4. What? Between does not include the numbers listed. It does. If I say I have eaten between 3 and 20 meals this week, inclusive, then I'm giving you a range between 3 and 20, inclusive. The numbers between these endpoints. Which can be confusing with, you could be confusing it with the other usage of between, which is like, you have to choose between me and Greg. That's because me and Greg are not a continuum. We are discrete data. You have to choose between me and him, and I'm giving you the choices of the things you need to choose between. But when you're talking about numbers, between includes the things between them. I think very pregnant is a way of saying heavily pregnant. Yeah. Very pregnant, I can understand. Like, it's funny to say, like, you can't be very pregnant, but colloquially you would understand that they mean they are heavily pregnant. They are a long distance into their pregnancy. Physical qualities, blah blah blah, venerable for 90 or more years. As long as 90 or more. So 300 is fine, I guess. Playing a human. Humans are decisive and sometimes rash. They explore the darkest reaches of the world in search of knowledge and power. They hurl themselves into danger, dealing with consequences as they arise. They act first and ponder later, trusting their will to prevail and their native resourcefulness to see them through perilous situations. Humans always look to the horizon, seeking to expand their influence and their territory. They chase power and want to change the world, for good or ill. Their settlements are among the brightest lights in a dark and untamed world, and humans constantly seek to explore new lands and settle new frontiers. Their self-reliance and bravery inclines humans towards martial classes such as fighter, warlord, and rogue. They often prefer to find hidden reserves of strength in themselves rather than trust to the magic of wizards or clerics. That said, humans tend to be a pious race, worshipping the gods, the whole pantheon of gods. Their myths name no god as the creator of the race. Some tales say that the gods worked together to create them, infusing them with the best qualities of each race that had come before. Other tales say that humans were the creation of a god whose name is no longer known, a god killed in the war against the primordials, and perhaps assassinated by another deity. Asmodeus and Zahir are often accused of the deed. Humans are tolerant of other races, different beliefs, and foreign cultures. Yeah, okay. This is a fantasy game. Most human settlements are diverse places where different races live together in a relative peace. The human empire of Narath, the last great world power, united many different peoples. Most of the human towns have survived the empire's fall, are fortified bastions against the encroaching darkness. When elven forests are razed or dwarven mines overrun, the survivors often flee to the nearest human town for protection. How aspirational, yeah. Despite the far reach and power of Narath, humans in the present day are a scattered and divided people. Dozens of small kingdoms, fiefdoms, and free cities have arisen from Narath's ruins, and many of these realms are petty, weak, or isolated. Tensions and misunderstandings among them often precipitate skirmishes, espionage, betrayal, and even open warfare. Human characteristics: adaptable, ambitious, bold, corruptible, creative, driven, hardy, pragmatic, resourceful, territorial, and tolerant. Yeah, okay. Tolerant. It's like Smarch. Yeah, lousy Smarch weather. Alright, human adventurers, don't need to read that. Tieflings. Okay, we're almost at the end of the characters, and we're going to be getting into classes. Yeah, Tiefling is the last. Tieflings. This is the Tieflings. Some good artwork. Heirs of a shattered empire who live in the shadows and do not fear the dark. Between 5'6" and 6'2", 140 to 230 pounds, +2 to intelligence and a +2 to charisma. Medium 6 squares low light, common and one choice of other. Skill bonuses +2 to bluff and +2 to stealth. Bluff being deception. Do I prefer deception or bluff? I think deception makes more sense because bluffing implies speaking, and deception is more... So it's weird that they went in the correct manner with sleight of hand and deception when they were renaming skills, but then they went the opposite way with diplomacy being renamed to persuasion. I don't understand that. Your features are Blood Hunt. You get a +1 racial bonus to attack rolls against bloodied foes. Interesting. So if they are half health or less, you are better at finishing them off. Interesting if a Tiefling is going up against a Dragonborn then. Because they both start with like a +5 to their attack rolls, let's say. And if the Dragonborn gets bloodied, they both now have a +6 to their attack rolls. That would be interesting. In 2nd edition, never heard of Tieflings. When did they introduce Tieflings? 3rd edition? Or are they introduced in 4th? I think 3rd edition, because you get Tieflings in Pathfinder, right? Fair with how humans are commonly portrayed in fantasy, they are the more tolerant race. Elves tend to be the xenophobic ones, yeah. They weren't a playable race back then. Were they in the game, but you just couldn't play as one? I'm looking for a sugar deity. No Goliaths in 4e? Nope. Not in the Player's Handbook, anyway. There are other races you can play in 4th edition that were released later. There are Tieflings in 2nd edition AD&D. Interesting. Introduced in the Planescape setting, that would make sense. That would make a lot of sense. They must have been popular because they suddenly became like a core mechanic, like a core race that you can pick in every edition from then on. Introduced in 2e but weren't a playable race until 4e. I think there were rules in one of the later books, but not commonly playable. Interesting. So this is actually when Tieflings were introduced as a playable thing. What a cool piece of history. So your skill bonuses are Blood Hunt, you get a +1 racial bonus against bloodied foes. Fire Resistance, you have a Resist Fire +1. You have a Resist Fire 5 + 1/2 your level. So the way they did Resistance was not just you have any incoming damage, it was a particular number that you reduce fire damage by. So if you take 10 damage and you are a level 10 character, you resist all of it. But if you take 10 fire damage and you're a level 8 character, you resist 9 of it. Infernal Wrath. So at first level you would get, so they would round down because I think that's the case here. So you can suffer 5 fire damage without it hurting you at all. I kind of prefer that way of doing things. I find resistance and vulnerabilities to be a bit too blah, a bit too boring. Just halving the damage is a bit too meh. I kind of prefer the damage threshold of like, I'm resistant to this amount of damage, so you have to do above that in order to hurt me at all. So they were a playable race in 3.5, were they? Is that what you're saying? I specialise in 3.5 and Tiefling and Asma were playable then. Okay, cool. So this isn't the first time they were introduced. They were introduced in 3.5. Pretty sure everything was playable in 3.5. Yeah, it was known for being the crunchy one, right? So you've got Resist Fire + 1/2 your level, and then Infernal Wrath. You can use Infernal Wrath as an encounter power. What is Infernal Wrath? You call upon your furious nature to improve your odds of harming your foe. Encounter, minor action, personal. You can channel your fury to gain a +1 power bonus to your next attack roll against an enemy that hit you since your last turn. If your attack hits and deals damage, you add your charisma modifier as extra damage. Well, that's cool. You hit me in the last 6 seconds, so I'm going to minor action, give myself an Infernal Wrath. I'm going to add a +1 bonus to my attack roll. If I hit you, I'm going to deal my charisma damage as an extra modifier damage. Yeah, I like it. It's a little bit weak, I feel, because you're gonna add a +1, like 5% chance of hitting. Maybe that's good. And then if you hit, still you might not, but if you do hit, then you add somewhere between 2 and 5 damage to the attack roll, and it's only once per encounter. And it's only if they've hit you since the last turn. I don't know. It feels a little weak compared to some of the other race abilities, race features and things. They were likely playable in 2nd edition, but weren't mainstreamed until 3.5. Yeah, maybe. Technically playable in 2, but very difficult to get into the party based on the way the race was built. Got it. Heirs to an ancient infernal bloodline, Tieflings have no realms of their own, but instead live within human kingdoms and cities. They are descended from human nobles who bargained with dark powers, and long ago their empire subjugated half the world. But the empire was cast down into ruin, and Tieflings were left to make their own way in a world that often fears and resents them. Play a Tiefling if you want to be a hero who has a dark side to overcome, to be good at tricking, intimidating, and persuading others to do your will, or to be a member of a race that favours Warlock, Warlord, and Rogue classes. Physical qualities. Tiefling's appearance testifies to their infernal bloodline. They have large horns, thick, non-prehensile tails that range in length from 4 to 5 feet, sharply pointed teeth, and eyes that are solid orbs of black, red, white, silver, or gold. Their skin colour covers the whole human range and also extends to reds, from a ruddy tan to a brick red. Their hair cascading down from behind their horns is as likely to be dark blue, red, or purple as more common human colours. Tieflings favour dark colours and reds, leathers and glossy furs, small spikes, and buckles. Tiefling crafted arms and armour often have an archaic style, harkening back to the glory of their long-vanished empire. Playing a Tiefling. Hundreds of years ago, the leaders of the human empire of Baal Tarath made pacts with devils to solidify their hold over its enormous territory. Those humans became the first Tieflings, and they governed their empire in the name of their infernal masters. In time, Baal Tarath came into conflict with Arcosia, the ancient empire of Dragonborn, and decades of warfare left both empires in ruins. Baal Tarath's grand capital was thrown into ruin. Tieflings are the heirs of the surviving noble dynasties that ruled the empire. Their bloodline is tainted by their diabolical connections, passing to their descendants through all generations. In many ways, they are human. They can have children with humans, for example, but their offspring are always tieflings. That is how I run it in my games as well. Tieflings breed true. You can't be half tiefling in my games because they breed true. Centuries of other races' distrust and outright hatred have made tieflings self-reliant and often too willing to live up to the stereotypes imposed on them. As a race without a homeland, tieflings know that they have to make their own way in the world, and that they have to be strong to survive, and they are not quick to trust anyone who claims to be a friend. However, when a tiefling's companions demonstrate that they trust him or her, a tiefling quickly learns to extend the same trust to them. And once a tiefling gives someone trust and loyalty, the tiefling is a firm friend and ally for life. Although the nobles of Beltarath subjugated themselves to devils, most present-day tieflings give little thoughts to gods or patrons, preferring to look out for themselves. Therefore, they do not often follow the path of the divine. Tiefling clerics and paladins are rare. Tieflings are not numerous. Sometimes a tiefling merchant clan that is descended from Beltarath dynasty settles as a group in a land where wealth can purchase safety and comfort. But most tieflings are born outside such hidden dynasties, and grow up in the roughest quarters of human cities and towns. Did you ever play Hidden Dynasties? That was I think that was the name of the video game. That was a really good one. It was one of those where I never got to play it because I just went around to my friends and watched him play it. And he never gave me the fucking controls. These tieflings often become swindlers, thieves, or crime lords who carve out a niche for themselves amid the squalor of their surroundings. Tiefling characteristics: cunning, disquieting, imposing, mysterious, proud, rebellious, self-reliant, sinister, sly, or unconventional. They give a bunch of male names, they give a bunch of female names, but, unlike all the other races, they don't stop there. They say, some young tieflings striving to find a place in the world choose a name that signifies a concept, and then try to embody that concept. For some, the chosen name is a noble quest, and for others it's a grim destiny. Modern names, since things like art, carrion, chant, despair, fear, gladness, hope, ideal, music, etc. Do I pause here and go get some breakfast and then continue? We're only just starting chapter 4, character classes. I would like to actually get somewhere with this fucking book. You guys talk too much, that's the problem. I blame you. It's not me going on tangents. I'm talking about world building and shit. We'll start with some character classes, shall we? I'll read the introduction to character classes, and then before we get into the first class, I'll go get myself some breakfast. Because I'm starving, and it's getting late now. It's past midday. I'm still in my pajamas. Chapter 4, Character Classes. Your class is the primary definition of what your character can do in the extraordinary magical landscape of the Dungeons and Dragons world. A class is more than a profession. It is your character's calling. Your class choice shapes every action you take as you adventure across a spell-tangled, monster-ridden, battle-torn fantasy world. Will you be a gutsy, youthful sword fighter? A pact sworn warlock with questionable ties? A gods-worshipping cleric who knows too much? A flamboyant rogue with a dagger up your sleeve? A tattooed wizard with a crystal staff? The choice is yours. The chapter includes the following material: introducing the classes, discussion of the details that makes up each class, and your first look at the Paragon paths and epic destinies, how to read a power, the specifics on how to understand your class's powers and each power formats and effects, the classes themselves, features and complete power descriptions for the cleric, fighter, paladin, ranger, rogue, warlock, warlord, and wizard, as well as their Paragon paths, and epic destinies, a selection of epic destinies that your character can achieve. Look at this cool ass fucking artwork, man. Bam! Look at that. Some sort of cold dragon or radiant dragon being fought by all these different classes. That's some cool art. Introducing the classes. This chapter presents full descriptions of the following 8 classes. There's only 8 classes in 4th edition for anyone who missed the first Robert Reads of going over the 4th. Cleric, fighter, paladin, ranger, rogue, warlock, warlord, and wizard. Cleric, a divinely inspired warrior. Fighter, a master of martial combat. Paladin, a champion dedicated to a specific deity. Ranger, a ranged or 2-weapon combat specialist. Rogue, a combatant who uses stealth and slyness to thwart enemies. Warlock, a wielder of arcane power gleaned from otherworldly entities. Warlord, a commander who leads from the front. And Wizard, the world's most powerful purveyor of magic. Each class description opens with a summary of the class's basic traits and an overview of the class's place in the world. Role. In battle, the members of this class act as defenders, strikers, leaders, or controllers. Each class has a role associated with it. Different classes approach their role in different ways, and many classes include limited elements of one or more of the other roles as well. For example, both the fighter and paladin are defenders, but the fighter adds some aspect of the striker to his repertoire, while the paladin has some abilities often associated with leaders, such as healing. Power source. Each of the 8 classes draws in power from the arcane, the divine, or the martial power source. Arcane, divine, and martial. Not arcane, divine, and natural, which is interesting. No druids. Nope. No barbarians, no bards, no druids, no sorcerers. No artificers, and a warlord. Key abilities. Most classes have powers and other features that rely on 3 different ability scores. Characters of these classes generally want their 3 best scores in those abilities. Armor and weapon proficiencies. Different classes are proficient with different kinds of armor and weapons, shown in these 2 entries. An armor or weapon proficiency you gain from a class counts as the appropriate armor proficiency or weapon proficiency feat. Implement. If the class can use one or more kinds of implements, that information is noted here. No idea what implements are. That's the first speak of those, so looking forward to learning what the fuck that is. Bonus to defense. Each class gives you a bonus to one or more of your defenses. Hit points. Each class description indicates how many hit points you have at first level and how many hit points you gain with each new level you attain. Healing surges. Your class determines how many healing surges you can spend in a day. And trained skills. Every class has a list of class skills, and you choose a specific number of trained skills from that list. Some classes give you a predetermined trained skill. The last few lines of the class traits section points to the later parts of the class entry. Build options and class features are more fully described in the next major section. Sidebar. Class overview. A sidebar in each class entry highlights a few key elements of the class. Characteristics. The features or qualities of the class that make it distinct. This section describes how the class fulfills its role. Religion, a section of deities of the D&D pantheon best suited to the class, and races, the races that are best suited for each class. Implements are arcane foci? I don't know. I haven't got there yet. Creating a character. The next section of a class entry describes each class build in more detail. The build is the theme you think about when choosing your powers and other abilities. The build you choose, if you choose one, suggests what abilities you should prioritize, and gives you some guidance as you choose powers, at first level and as you gain levels. A build isn't intended as a constraint, but as a way to help you make informed choices. If you want to be a fighter with a great axe rather than wielding a one-handed weapon and shield, the Great Weapon Fighter build points you towards the powers that are most effective in your hands. You can choose powers intended for the Guardian Fighter build instead, of course, and they might help your character be a little more balanced. Some of those powers, though, won't be as good for you as they'd be for a fighter with a shield. Builds aren't required, they exist to help guide your decision. I like that. They're making it very clear that, like, hey, yes, we've put pointers in, but you don't have to play it that way. You can choose to be unoptimized if you want. Each build includes suggestions for choosing feats, skills, and powers for your first level character. These are only suggestions. You are free to choose the feats, skills, and powers that are most appealing to you and best fit with your character concept. Class features. Class features are abilities shared by every member of the class. Some class features are powers that every member of the class can use, such as a Warlock's Eldritch Blast, or the... So Warlock's Eldritch Blast is a class feature, as it should be, and then they removed that for 5e. The fuck? Like they've done for Paladins and Divine Smite and Rangers and Hunter's Mark. Those are inherent class features. Just give them to the class and allow them to just use them. Stupid. Others are more like racial traits. They're not so much things you do as things that modify the effects of what you do. Powers. The longest section of the class description contains full descriptions of all the class's at-will encounter and daily attack powers, as well as its utility powers. Alright, that was a lot, but we're moving on to Paragon paths. Paragon paths are the things that you only get from level 11. You have survived and thrived through 10 levels of adventure. You've explored dank dungeons, defeated vile monsters, and learned priceless secrets. You've started making a name for yourself. Now you're ready to take the next step. You're ready to choose a Paragon path. As your class describes your basic role in the party, your Paragon path represents a particular area of expertise within that role. It's a form of specialization beyond even what a build choice represents. You might be a battle cleric and specialize in melee powers, but starting at 11th level you can be a war priest and specialize in battle prayers. As shown on your character advancement table on page 29, your Paragon path gives you new abilities from level 11 through to level 20, but adopting a Paragon path doesn't mean you stop advancing in your class. All the powers and features you gain from your Paragon path come in addition to your class powers and features, not instead of them. You don't stop being a cleric when you become a radiant servant. Instead, you gain new capabilities that extend, enhance, and complement the abilities of your class. That makes sense. Paragon paths also broaden the use of action points in different ways. Each Paragon path features a different extra capability that characters can unlock by spending action points. So once you pick your Paragon path, you can still spend an action point to take an extra action, but you'll also have a new capability for action points that is unique to your path. Some of these capabilities come in addition to the extra action you get for spending an action point, and some are used instead of getting the extra action point. Blah blah blah. When you reach 11th level, choose a Paragon path. All paths have prerequisites, conditions you have to fulfill before you can adopt that path. Paragon multiclassing. You might choose to take on powers from a second class in place of a Paragon path. See page 208 for multiclassing. Jesus, I'm just bored of reading about Paragon paths now for some reason. I'm only like half a page into it. Introducing the Paragon paths. Maybe it's because Paragon path, and the number of times they're saying Paragon path. Paragon paths are represented in alphabetical order following the appropriate classes in this chapter. Each Paragon path description provides a general overview followed by the game rule information. Prerequisites. If we turn this into a drinking game, you'd all be fucked. If the Paragon path has requirements for entry, they are noted here. If a Paragon path has a specific class as a prerequisite, you must either be a member of that class or have selected a multiclass feat for the indicated class. For example, you can take the Angelic Avenger Paragon path if you're a cleric, or if you have selected a cleric multiclass feat. So multiclassing is reliant on feats here, maybe? Parpets, yeah. Paragon pats, PPs, parpets. Honestly, it's because they haven't actually said what they are yet. Yeah, it's you get to level 10 as normal. Then at level 11, you continue on your path, your progression, but you can also now get... It's like a second class that you're choosing to go along with your class, and you're gaining levels in both. And the classes are designed to be helpful to your main class. Path features. Every Paragon path grants you specific path features which are similar in nature to the features you gain from your class. Powers. Your Paragon path gives you powers which are described here. Paragon paths. Cleric. Your Paragon path options are Angelic Avenger, Divine Oracle, Radiant Servant, or War Priest. Fighter. Your options are Iron Vanguard, Kensai, which is interesting because they introduced that as a subclass of monk later, like weapons specialist, Pit Fighter, or Swordmaster. Paladins, your choices are Astral Weapon, Champion of Order, Hospitaller, and Justiciar. Hospitaller? Hospitaler? Hospitaller? Hospital, ER. Hospitaller. What is a hospitaller? Someone who puts everybody else in hospital? Call an ambulance. For you. Hospitaller. 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 Paragon Path is one of the hardest sections to read. The beginning of the PHP is very drunk ADHD. Also, the entire PP says Paragon Path. Every damn sentence. Every single sentence. Right? I'm glad you think the same. I'm halfway into the page and I'm already sick of Paragon Paths. Probably. And I picked up on it as well. I was like, because I'm saying Paragon Path every fucking sentence. This section brought to you by the letter P. Paragon Path powers, probating program, probably problematic pro. Hospitaler's like a Templar knight back in the day originally. Someone who's very hospitable? Hospitaler. 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 The hospitaler is an older term for a place for medical care. Hospitaler. Alright. Rangers, you have the option of Battlefield Archer, Beast Stalker, Pathfinder, and Storm Warden. I love that D&D 4e, after the edition of Pathfinder was released as 3.75, as like the thing that people jumped to because 4e was so shit. I love that 4e introduces the term Pathfinder to one of the ranger options. Also, a lot of these are just striking me as like subclasses. It's like you pick your class and then you don't pick your subclass till level 11. Because subclass works in a similar way to how they're describing it. You keep leveling up in your class and you get any class features that you get along the way. It's just that you also are leveling up in your subclass and you get subclass features at certain levels. Like at level 6 monk, you get your subclass feature, but you also get evasion or whatever it is. Not evasion at level 6. What is it? Magic hands, I think. That's the way it was in early editions. They were called prestige classes and you couldn't get them until later levels. Prestige classes in Pathfinder are have prerequisites of you having multi-classed often. Anyway, rogues. You get Cat Burglar, Dagger Master, Master Infiltrator, and Shadow Assassin. For Warlock, it's the only one that gets 3 options instead of 4, which, what the fuck? If you're creating an edition of a game, and for every one of the classes you've come up with 4 options, and then at the point of publishing you go, we've only got 3 options for Warlock, something's gone wrong. Why has fuck's Warlock not got a 4th option? That's just glaringly obvious. Anyway, Warlocks get Doomsayer, Fey Touched, and Life Stealer. Warlords. Warlords get Battle Captain, Combat Veteran, Knight Commander, and Sword Marshal. Which is different to Sword Master, I suppose, that the fighters get. Because your mum? Redhead stepchild. And then Wizards get Battle Mage, Blood Mage, Spellstorm Mage, and Wizard of the Spiral Tower. One of these things is not like the others. Epic Destinies. Alright, we're moving on from Paragon Paths. Epic Destinies. After 20 levels of adventure, what trials could be left to challenge you? You've conquered countless foes and become a hero to common folk everywhere. Deadly dragons and powerful mages alike have fallen to your might. Your gaze has begun to turn to the plains beyond the world, and even to the gods themselves. Finally, you realize there are no heights that you cannot achieve, and Alexander wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Blood Mage sound fun? Yeah. Dagger Master. Are we going to say Epic Destiny every 4th word now too? Yeah, maybe. It's time for you to assume your epic destiny and shape your legend in the universe forevermore. Can somebody count how many times this section says epic destiny? Like a Paragon Path. They've even slipped Paragon Path into a section not about Paragon Paths. Like a Paragon Path, an epic destiny grants special powers in addition to your class powers and features. Unlike Paragon Paths, epic destinies are not extensions of your class. Instead, they offer extraordinary abilities that represent your journey towards your ultimate fate, as you define it. See page 172 for more about epic destinies. Epic Destiny. Archmage. Ultimate master of arcane spells. Deadly trickster. A wanderer, thief, pragmatist, and survivor. Demigod. You're on the path to godhood. Eternal seeker. Your destiny finds you. Oh, is that it? Okay. Not much. I thought it was going to continue on to the next page. That's it for Epic Destiny. Paragon Paths was 3/4 of a page, and Epic Destinies was just 1/4. and you only get 4 options. There's 8 different classes with 8 times 4 is 32, minus 1 is 31. There's 31 different Paragon paths and only 4 epic destinies. I suppose they just were like, look, nobody plays on past level 20. And they still kept saying Paragon path, yeah. Accept your epic destiny in a game designed to be fully choice-based and completely against the core concept of destiny, yeah. If this was a drinking game, we'd end up in the hospitaler. Did I miss what they were? I thought they were just doing the intro. I thought they were just doing the intro as well, so I wasn't really fully paying attention. Epic Destinies are basically just another choice that you pick after your Paragon path has run out and you're a level 20 now. You now pick your Epic Destiny at level 21. The Hospital ER, yeah. Alright, power types and usage. Every class has access to a mix of attack powers, used to harm your enemies in combat more or less directly, and utility powers, used to overcome a variety of obstacles both in and out of combat. Within each type, different powers have different restrictions on how often you can use them, at will, encounter, or daily. You can use a power whenever you are able to take the action and the power that the power requires. Certain conditions, as defined in Chapter 9, prohibit you from taking actions. Your DM might rule that you can't use powers in special circumstances, such as when your hands are tied. At-will powers. You can use at-will powers as often as you want. They represent easy weapon swings or simple magical effects that don't put any unusual strain on you or tax your resources in any way. Encounter powers. An encounter power can be used once per encounter. You need to take a short rest before you can use one again. Oh, so they are once per short rest. They just don't call them encounter powers anymore, but they're still short rest. I assumed, wrongly it seems, that if you use an encounter power and then the combat ends and initiative goes out of combat and then you move on and you're like into the next section of the dungeon and you do a puzzle or whatever and then you get into another combat, you can use your encounter power again because it's a different encounter. But no, apparently its encounter power is just another way for me in short rest. A short rest is only 5 minutes long in 4E. Ah, there you go. That makes sense. So you are going to have a short rest. After your battle, you have 5-minute breather. I think that's a good thing. I think that they need 3 different types of rest in D&D, not just 2. They've got short rests and long rests. I think they need breather as well. I think they need a breather, a short rest, and a long rest. For me, in my game, when I eventually make one, I'm sure I'm going to include those 3 things because there are some things that just make sense that you get them back on a breather. You just take 5 minutes to sit down, catch your breath, recover a little bit of, let your adrenaline reset to what it should be, and then you continue on. But you don't have a full hour to have a sit down and patch yourself up a bit. And then maybe even a 4th type of rest. Breather, short rest, long rest, and then downtime would be another version of that. You take several days. I don't know what to call that, but several days of rest. Extended rest or something. 5 minutes isn't even a smoke break. Yeah. A nap, a siesta. Yeah. You just exhale and say, fuck, that was nearly my life. And then you regain that ability. Yeah. A chillax. A rest you can take while travelling. A constitutional. What cures a level of exhaustion again? Depends who you're asking what which edition. In 5th edition, a level of exhaustion only goes away at the end of a long rest. So you have to wait overnight to cure a level of exhaustion. Which is, if you got the level of exhaustion because you were swimming and I made you make a constitution save against the swimming, and then you get a level of exhaustion because you failed to save, and then you get out of you get out of the pond and you sit down for 2 hours and go, hoo-wee, you shouldn't have the level of exhaustion anymore. So I hand wave that shit and I say that sometimes circumstances dictate that a level of exhaustion goes away on a short rest. But a level of exhaustion, 5e rules as written, goes away at the end of a long rest. In the new version of the game that is coming out soon, the new PHB, certain people, rangers I think, rangers get the ability to get rid of a level of exhaustion on a short rest because they're designed to be like on the move a lot more than other classes, like ranging. And so rangers are easier at getting rid of exhaustion, which I think is good. Vacation. Here, maybe a vacation. If you wanted to have a character that recharged through some kind of deliberate meditation, how would that work? Short rest, I guess. Yeah, that's. I mean, that you've already got that in the form of monks. In 5th edition, you have a monk. Monks get key points that they can spend on like martial abilities, affecting other people's key and stuff, stunning strikes and pushing them prone and all sorts of other things, pushing yourself beyond the limits and doing 2 more attacks as a bonus action. You can spend your key on all sorts of stuff, and then you only get your key back if you take a short rest, and at least half of that short rest is spent in meditation. So that's built right into 5th edition already. Why does 1 day of yard work give me 3 days of exhaustion? I missed if you did Epic Destiny, aka Apex Hero, did you? I did, yes. It was only 1/4 of a page, so easy to miss. It was right after Paragon Path. Yeah, so I can imagine doing a breather, a short rest, a long rest, and like a vacation or extended edition, or extended whatever, and then having things that are like, on a long rest, you only regain 1 of your health points. Because in my game, I'm also going to be splitting health and stamina, probably. So that if you sneak up behind somebody and stab them, you don't have to get through their entire hit point pool. You can just go straight to their health pool, which is going to be significantly smaller. Whereas if you're fighting somebody actively, you're hitting away at their stamina first until they run out of stamina, and then you can hit their health pool. And on a long rest, you'll regain all of your stamina, but only 1 point of your hit points, your health. Whereas, like, if I can say, like, oh, at the end of an extended rest, or at the end of a vacation, then you regain all of your health. So there'd be certain things of, like, if you take a long rest, an extended long rest, you regain all of your hit points. Yeah, something like that. In 3.5, in 3E, you only regained a hit dice per day. Yes, yeah. I like. There's certain things that I've heard about and experienced of different games that I like, and I'm stealing them to create the game that I want. And the fun thing about the game that I'm making is I don't give a shit if anybody else plays it. Like, I'm not playing it with the game design of like, oh, I need to sort of homogenize this so that more people will play it and whatever. I'm going to create a game at some point and publish it. And it will be so that I have something to point to when people play in my games. I can be like, hey, come play a game with me, or play one of my private sanctums or whatever. This is what we're playing. And here it is. Here are the rules that I've published. And if other people love it and want to play it, then absolutely fine. But I'm not in the game to be like, I'm going to be the next Pathfinder. It sounds complicated, but also makes sense. ADHD pedants, yeah. Alright, where was I? At-will powers, blah blah blah, encounter powers. Encounter powers can be used once per encounter. You need to take a short rest before you can use one again. Encounter powers produce more powerful, more dramatic effects than at-will powers. If you're a martial character, they are exploits you've practiced extensively, but can pull off only once in a while. If you're an arcane or divine character, these are spells or prayers of such power that they take time to reform in your mind after you unleash their magic energy. Daily powers. Daily powers. A daily power can be used once per day. Duh. Daily powers are the most powerful effects you can produce, and using one takes a significant toll on your physical and mental resources. If you're a martial character, you're reaching into your deepest reserves of energy to pull off an amazing exploit. If you're an arcane magic user, you're reciting a spell of such complexity in your mind that your mind can only hold it in place for so long, and once it's recited, it's wiped from your memory. If you're a divine character, the divine might that you channel to invoke these powers is so strong that you can only harness it once a day. I feel like they're kind of reaching and stretching to try and make it make sense, as to be like, we've got this mechanic for balance reasons. Why does it make sense in the lore? Oh, the magic wipes it from your memory. All right, whatever. That makes sense in some kind of lame way, I guess. Nice thing about health points is you can directly subtract armor class from that without affecting the endurance point economy. Yes, yeah. I like that. I can use a spell I've practiced, but only once a day because I forget it. Lol. Yeah, exactly. And then something about sleeping goes, oh yeah, that's how that spell works. In the morning. Ah, such a klutz. Oh, I'm just always forgetting things. And then 20 years of doing that every single day, you're like, okay, now I'm going to remember what this is. I'm going to write it down. And then I use it, and I'm like, fuck, what was it again? I've forgotten it again. I just know I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to remember it. It's typical, isn't it? It's wiped from your memory, and the next morning you have to study again. Like Scabatha, but every day you forget any spell that you've used. I probably will just put in my games, like, there's a god of magic who has orchestrated spell slots, essentially. And that's just a thing that everybody knows, because the god of magic is like, this, you can only cast this number of days. Why can I only cast it that number of days? Because the god said so. It's like Discworld, the opposite of Discworld, where the spell in your head refuses to let the others be memorized because it doesn't like the other spells. That's funny. Daily powers usually include an effect that takes place regardless of whether the power is used successfully. As a result, these limited resources are at least slightly beneficial every time you use them. Good game design. Once you use a daily power, you need to take an extended rest before you can use it again. So they're calling them extended rests. I might have to jump ahead to 263. 253, 261, 263. Rest and recovery. Short rest. So they don't call it long rest, they call it extended rest. Interesting. Rest and recovery. Sooner or later, even the toughest adventures need to rest. When you're not in an encounter, you can take one of two types of rest, a short rest or an extended rest. About 5 minutes long, a short rest consists of stretching your muscles and catching your breath after an encounter. And at least 6 hours long, an extended rest includes relaxation, sometimes a meal, and usually sleep. Short rests allow you to renew your encounter powers and spend healing surges to regain hit points. Short rest. Duration, about 5 minutes long. No limit per day, you can take as many as you want. No strenuous activity, you have to rest during a short rest. You can stand guard, sit at a place, ride on a wagon or other vehicle, or do tasks that don't require much exertion. Renew powers. After a short rest, you renew your encounter powers so they're available for your next encounter. I could also imagine ruling it that, like, you can walk, you can continue adventuring doing a short rest, but the short rest is doubled in length. Because I'm thinking of, like, if you're running and you get in a level of exhaustion and you and you slow yourself to a walk, you're still walking, you're catching your breath, you are resting from the run, but you're not going to recover your breath as quickly maybe as you would if you just, like, collapsed on the floor and laid down and rested directly. So I'd probably make it that a short rest doing nothing is 5 minutes and a short rest while moving is like 15 minutes or something. Maybe. Something like that. Maybe just 10 minutes. I love how they use the terms long before they define them for you. Yeah, I mean, they've got to though, aren't they? Because short rest is going to start, like, it said you can get back your encounter, blah blah blah. So, like, the stuff talking about encounter powers references short rests, and the short rest references encounter powers. You're gonna have one before the other, aren't you? It does at least say page 263 so that I can jump forward and read what short rests are about. After a short rest, you renew your encounter powers so they're available for your next encounter. Spend healing surges. You can spend as many healing surges as you want. If you run out of healing surges, you must take an extended rest to regain them. Using powers while you rest. If you use an encounter power, such as a healing power, during a short rest, you need another short rest to renew it so that you can use it again. And interruptions. If your short rest is interrupted, you need to rest another 5 minutes to get the benefits of the short rest. And then we've got extended rest. Once a day you can gain the benefits of an extended rest. Duration, at least 6 hours long. Once a day, after you finish an extended rest, you have to wait another 12 hours before you can begin another one. So that's not once a day then, is it, dickhead? Do some maths. I finish my extended rest that was 6 hours long. 12 hours later, I start another one that's 6 hours long. 12 hours after that, I start another one, which is 6 hours long. 12 hours after that, I start another one, which is 6 hours long. How many rests am I going to get? I'm going to get more than one a day. I'm going to get 1.5 a day. On average, I think.
That was some quick maths. Because you're getting 18 hours into 24 hours. Out of one rest every 18 hours. Which is 3/4 of a day. One rest every 3/4 of a day. How hard would it have been to say you need to wait at least 16 hours before you can begin another one? No strenuous activity. You normally sleep during extended rests, though you don't have to. You can engage in light activity that doesn't require much exhaustion. Regain hit points and healing surges at the end of an extended rest. You regain any hit points you've lost and any healing surges you've spent. Powers. At the end of an extended rest, you regain all your encounter powers and daily powers. Action points. At the end of an extended rest, you lose any unspent action points, but start fresh with 1 action point. And interruptions. If anything interrupts your extended rest, such as an attack, add the time spent dealing with the interruption to the total time you need to spend in the extended rest. That's fine. That's fair. Sleeping and waking up. You need at least 6 hours of sleep every day to keep functioning at your best. If at the end of an extended rest you haven't slept for at least 6 hours in the last 24, you gain no benefit from that extended rest. What the fuck? You normally sleep during an extended rest, though you don't have to. So you can benefit from an extended rest without sleep. The very next section says, if you do not sleep during the extended rest and you have not slept in the last 24 hours, which is included because it's once a day and you can't do it more than that, then you gain no benefit from it. So then you do need to sleep during the 6-hour period of the extended rest. Otherwise, you're saying you need to have slept 6 hours in the last 24 hours and then you have another extended rest within 24 hours, but you can still say you've slept within the last 24 hours, which means it's not once a day. So you're directly contradicting one thing or the other on the same half of the page. Why don't they have pedantic assholes working for them? Have a pedantic proofreader. Proofreaders need to be the biggest fucking pedants in the world because they pick up on this shit. Another 4.0 paradox. Everyone should just get more sleep. You should take 6 hours of short rests. Slept 4 hours twice, 8 hours apart. But then you're having a long rest. I suppose you're not because it's 4 hours and 6 hours. Free Robert Rants. 6 isn't enough sleep for adventurers. I know, right? 6 hours? Jesus, 6 hours. If I was operating on 6 hours sleep, which I often am, I'm a constant level of exhaustion. Anyway, annoying. So you do need to sleep or you don't gain the benefits of the extended rest. When you're asleep, you're unconscious. You wake up if you take damage, or you make a successful perception check with a -5 penalty to hear sounds of danger. An ally can wake you by shaking you as a standard action, or by shouting as a free action. And then stuff about keeping watch, which we won't get into because we're in the middle of something else right now. Actually, I will because it's the last thing of this chapter and I might forget to come back to it later otherwise. Keeping watch. Adventurers typically take turns keeping watch while their companions sleep. If 5 characters are in your group, each of you can take a turn on watch duty for 1.5 hours and sleep for 6 hours, so that you spend a total of 7.5 hours resting. When it's your turn on watch, you actively look for signs of danger. When you start your shift on watch, make a perception check. If something occurs during your watch, the DM uses the result of your perception check to determine whether you notice it. If your entire group sleeps at the same time without setting a watch, the DM uses your individual passive perception scores, counting a -5 penalty for being asleep, to determine whether you hear approaching danger and wake up. Why would I ever shake someone if I can free action shout? You might be in a circumstance where shouting is inappropriate, like if you're hiding from somebody and you can hear a guard is coming along the corridor and you just want to be like, wake up, shh, wake up. Then you wouldn't want to shout. I haven't had a long rest in 10 years, I've got children. 6 whole hours of sleep? It's a wonderful and awesome full night's rest. It's more fun to wake them by shake them. Shake them to wake them. Alright, now we jump back to page 54 to the stuff where it was talking about rests. Blah, 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 blah. Once you use a daily power, you need to take an extended rest before you can use it again. How to read a power. No part of the D&D game has as much variety as the powers that describe what characters can do. Even so, the way that various powers are described follows a structured format. Here's the information you need to understand in order to understand how a power works. Name and level. Acid Wave, Wizard Attack 19. The first line of a power description gives the name of the power, the class it's associated with, the kind of power it is, attack or utility, and the power's level, or the fact that it's a class feature. In the above example, Acid Wave is an attack power that a wizard can use at 19th level. So, let me draw attention to something real quick. This is what I'm looking at. How to read a power. And you see the little bolded line there that says Acid Wave, Wizard Attack 19. That's the example they give. And directly beneath the example they give, it says, the first line of a power description gives the name of the power, Acid Wave, the class it's associated with, Wizard, and the kind of power... Oh, no, this is on me. It does say Wizard Attack 19. I jumped over the word attack and thought it didn't say the word attack anywhere in it, and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? For some reason, my brain just went Wizard 19, and I was like, it doesn't say attack anywhere! But no, that's on me. I take back my impending sass that I was about to give them. Rant cancelled. I'm disappointed. Yeah, I can admit when the thing I was about to rant about isn't actually a problem. It was a problem with my reading comprehension. It was a problem with my skim reading. Nice sticker. I know, right? It's pretty cool, eh? Where can they get stickers like that? Well, actually, they can't, because it's anniversary merch, so it was limited time only. You can get it by becoming a patron during my... by being a patron during my anniversary time around May. Alright, blah 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 blah. Some powers, such as the racial powers in Chapter 3 and the feat powers in Chapter 6, carry different information on the right side of this line. Flavor text. A wave of acid dissolves all creatures that stand before you. The next section of a power description gives a brief explanation of what the power does, sometimes including information about what it looks or sounds like. The flavor text for Acid Wave appears here as an example. A power's flavor text helps you understand what happens when you use a power and how you might describe it when you use it. You can alter this description however you like to fit your own idea of what your power looks like. Your wizard's magic missile spell, for example, might create phantasmal skulls that howl through the air to strike your opponent, rather than simple bolts of magical energy. What you need to know, when you need to know the exact effect, look at the rules text that follows. It's another 5.5 pages. Please get some breakfast. Is it? Holy shit. Fuck, it is. Oh well. I'm in it now. I'm in it. Keywords. At will. Martial weapon. Encounter. Divine. Daily. Acid. Arcane. Implement. A power's keyword entry gives you important rules information about the power. The first keyword indicates whether the power is an at-will, encounter, or daily power. One example of each type is given above. The colour used in the line containing the power name also conveys this information. At-will powers have a green bar, encounter powers have a red bar, and daily powers have a black bar. I like that, that's smart. The other keywords define the fundamental effects of a power. For instance, a power that deals acid damage is an acid effect, and thus has the acid keyword. A power that has the poison keyword might deal poison damage, or it might slow the target, immobilize the target, or stun the target. But the poison keyword indicates that it's a poison effect, and other rules in the game relate to that fact in different ways. Dwarves have a bonus to saving throws against poison effects, for example. I think this is good. Good game design here. I don't know why they lost this for 5e. Keywords help to define how or if a power works when the target has resistance, vulnerability, or immunity to a damage type of an affected type, or if the power interacts with existing effects. For example, a ritual that forbids teleportation could block a power that has the teleportation keyword. That makes sense. Resistance or immunity to one keyword of power does not protect a target from the power's other effects. When damage of a power is described as more than one type, divide the damage evenly between the damage types. Round up for the first damage type, round down for all the others. For example, a power that deals 25 damage, fire and thunder damage deals 13 fire damage and 12 thunder. I like that. I didn't realise that was a thing. That seems like a simple way of doing it, rather than saying, this deals 13 fire damage and 12 thunder damage. Although it does... No, it's not simpler, actually, because it's simpler to write, but it does put the extra work on the player to keep a track of, like, being able to have numbers, which is not easy for people to do. If I said, what's half of 79? Go! You'd be like, 39. Which takes marginally more time than just reading it. So yeah, actually I thought I'd liked that, but no, I don't like that. I think splitting them into the types of damage makes sense. Although, does it save time overall by all of the times that you just take the damage regardless because you're not vulnerable or resistant or immune to fire or thunder? So then for those times you can just look at the 25 and go 25. Rather than going, you take 13 fire and 12 thunder, and then the player going, okay, let me subtract 13, and then let me subtract 12. That would take longer. Round up to the next nearest number and then half that. Yeah. Round up and down. That doesn't seem complicated and annoying. I'm back and forth on this, whether I like this game design of being like, this effect deals 25 damage. That damage is fire and thunder. I have done a similar thing with something I have homebrewed. So in my Tarask, available on my Patreon, in my version of the Tarask, it has a feature in its stat block that says dual damage types. All of its bite and claw and tail attacks count as both bludgeoning and piercing, for instance. So it's biting you, but it is also crushing you with that bite. It's got such a large Godzilla mouth that when it bites you, it's doing piercing and bludgeoning damage. So if you have a feature that's like, I'm resistant to piercing damage, well, sorry, you don't get to half it because it is also bludgeoning damage. If a power allows you to choose the damage type, the power then has that keyword for feats, resistances, and any other information that applies. For example, the wizard spell Elemental Maw does 6d6 plus your intelligence modifier damage of a type chosen from the following list: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. If you chose lightning damage, the Astral Fire feat, plus 1 feat bonus to damage rolls when you use powers that have the fire or radiant keywords, doesn't add to the power's damage, but the Raging Storm feat, plus 1 feat bonus to damage rolls when you use the powers that have the lightning or thunder damage, does. Why does that need a fucking paragraph? Why say something in 3 words when you can say it in 30? For example, the wizard's spell Elemental Maw does blah blah blah. Why did we need an example of a specific thing and then a specific feat and a specific... Like, everybody understands. If you choose a spell and choose it to be lightning, then it's not going to affect things that don't affect lightning. Keyword categories. Aside from usage keywords, at will, encounter, and daily, keywords fall into 4 categories. Power source. The power sources are described in this book are arcane, divine, and martial. Basic attacks, racial powers, and epic destiny powers that have no power source. Damage type. Many powers create energy or a substance that deals damage to their targets. The damages are acid, corrosive liquid; cold, ice crystals, arctic air, and frigid liquid; fire, explosive bursts, fiery rays, or simple ignition; force, invisible energy formed into incredibly hard yet non-solid shapes. I like how they describe it in here. It's a lot easier to understand force energy if you're using 4e rather than 5e. Everybody thinks force energy is something that it's not. Lightning, electrical energy. Necrotic, purple-black energy that deadens flesh and wounds the soul. Poison, toxins that reduce the creature's hit points. Psychic, effects that target the mind. Radiant, searing white light or shimmering colours. And thunder, shockwaves and deafening sounds. Interesting. So, acid, cold, fire, force, lightning, necrotic, poison, psychic, radiant, thunder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's all of them. I was trying to think if there was any missing from the ones that they use in 5e, but that should be everything. I think there's 13 damage types. It's these 10 plus bludgeoning, slashing, piercing. Effect type. Some powers are classified according to how their effects work. Charm, mental effects that control or influence the subject's actions. Conjuration, powers that create objects or creatures of magical energy. Fear, effects that inspire fright. Healing, powers that restore hit points. Illusion, powers that deceive the senses or the mind. Poison, substances that hamper or impede a creature. Polymorph, effects that alter a creature's physical form. Reliable, if you miss using a reliable power, you don't expend the use of the power. Sleep, powers that cause sleep or unconsciousness. Stance, a stance power lasts until the end of the encounter for 5 minutes or until you use another stance encounter. Teleportation, powers that transport creatures instantaneously from one location to another. And zone, powers that create lingering effects that extend over an area. Good to know. Those are very new effect types that I might not have heard of yet. Quick sidebar. Power sources. Every class relies on a particular source of energy for the fuel that enables members of that class to use powers. The 3 power sources associated with the classes in this book are Arcane, Divine, and Martial. Arcane. Drawing on magical energy that permeates the cosmos, the arcane power source can be used for a wide variety of effects, from fireballs to flight to invisibility. Warlocks and wizards, for example, use arcane magic. Each class is the representative of a different tradition of arcane study, and other traditions exist. Arcane powers are called spells. Divine. Divine magic comes from the gods. The gods grant powers to their devotees, which clerics and paladins, for example, access through prayers and litanies. Divine magic excels at healing, protection, and smiting the enemies of the gods. Divine powers are called prayers. Martial. Martial powers are not magic in the traditional sense, although some martial powers stand well beyond the capability of ordinary mortals. Martial characters use their own strength and willpower to vanquish their enemies. Training and dedication replace arcane formulas and prayers to grant fighters, rangers, rogues, and warlords, among others, their power. Martial powers are called exploits. Other power sources. Additional power sources and techniques provide characters of different classes with powers and abilities. These will appear in future Player's Handbook's volumes. For example, barbarians and druids. They are mentioning barbarians and druids now. For example, barbarians and druids draw on the primal forces of nature. Monks harness the power of their soul energy or ki, and scions call upon the mind to generate psionic powers. Future power sources include elemental, ki, primal, psionic, and shadow. So, at the release of the 4th edition Player's Handbook, they already knew that they were going to be coming out with barbarians, monks, druids, and scions, which is another class that we don't have. They still don't mention sorcerers or bards, though. Elemental powers, key powers, primal powers, psionic powers, and shadow powers. Interesting. Bards and sorcerers are in Player's Handbook too, I think. So you could play as bards and sorcerers in 4th edition, just not from the first Player's Handbook. Continuing back with keyword categories, we've got accessories. These keywords identify items used with the power. If you have a proficiency bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls from your weapon, or an enhancement bonus to your attack rolls and damage rolls from a magic weapon or an implement, you add that bonus when you use a power that has the associated keyword. Implement. Here we go. We heard about implements and didn't know what they were. Implement. Many arcane spells are more effective when used in conjunction with an implement. A wizard's staff, orb, or wand, or a warlock's rod or wand. So yes, you were talking about foci before. That's what they're using as they're calling it an implement rather than a focus for some reason. Many divine prayers use holy symbols as implements to grant its benefit to a divine character. A holy symbol must represent the character's patron deity or one of a group of deities the character serves. It's not necessary to have an implement in order to use a power that has the implement keyword. If it has the implement keyword, you don't have to use an implement, but if you use an implement, you can get the bonus that's associated with your implement. That makes sense. So if you've got a +1 wand, you can cast a spell that says wand, without using a wand. But if you did cast it with the wand, you'd get a +1 from it, from your +1 wand. That makes sense. Weapon. Many martial powers, as well as several divine powers, can be used only if you're wielding a weapon. You can use an unarmed attack as your weapon. You can use an unarmed attack as your weapon. Many martial powers can only be used if you're wielding a weapon, which includes unarmed strikes. So why include it at all? You can't disarm an unarmed strike, and if an unarmed strike counts as a weapon, why mention it at all? Because you can always just punch somebody to activate the weapon tag. What the fuck? Action type. The next line of a power description begins with what type of action you have to take when you use the power. Most powers require a standard action. Some powers are move actions, and a few are immediate interrupts or immediate reactions. A handful are minor actions or free actions, and a scant few require no action. Action types are described on page 276. Trigger. An ally in range is hit by an attack. Trigger. An adjacent enemy moves away from you. Trigger. Some powers that come into effect only if triggering conditions occurs. Examples above are some of the typical trigger entries. Attack type and range. Following a power's action type on the same line is the power's attack type and its range. The 4 attack types are melee, ranged, close, and area. Each of these attack types has rules for range and targeting. But I have to get to chapter 9 before I understand what it means. Even though these terms are called attack types, they apply to utility powers as well as attack powers. Melee. A melee power affects a target or targets within melee reach. Many melee powers require a weapon. You make a separate attack roll against each target. Melee weapon. A melee attack power that has a range of weapon allows you to attack a target within the reach of the weapon you're wielding. Some weapons extend your reach beyond adjacent squares. Example, if you use a melee weapon power while you're wielding a dagger, you can attack a target within 1 square of you. If you're wielding a halberd, a reach weapon, you can attack a target within 2 squares of you. Melee 1. A melee power that has a range of 1 can be used on only 1 adjacent target. Melee touch. A melee power that has a range of touch can be used on any target you can reach. Some creatures larger than medium size have a reach of more than 1 square. Any target or every target within reach? Unclear. It doesn't say melee touch 1. So you can touch everybody within reach and quickly touch everybody. You have to roll something for a touch to succeed? I don't know yet. Maybe. I know that in Pathfinder, and therefore by extension 3.5, people have touch AC, which is different from their AC. Like, if somebody's wearing full plate, they might have like an AC of 18, which means it's hard to get damage through to them. But if you just want to touch them with a spell, like Shocking Grasp or something, or inflict wounds, or cure wounds, like you don't have to get through their armor class, and so they have a different armor class for how hard it is it to just touch them. Is touch an action? It would depend on what the spell was. Like, it would say action, melee touch. So those are 2 different things. The range is melee touch. You have to be able to touch them in order to cast it. And then the action is dependent on what the fuck you're doing. If you're casting a spell on them and then touching them, that's probably an action. Ranged. A ranged power affects a target or targets at distance. For details about how ranged attack works, see blah blah blah. Ranged weapon. A ranged attack power that has a range of weapon allows you to attack a target within your weapon's range. That makes sense. If the target's farther away than the normal range but within the long range, you take a -2 penalty on attack rolls. Which also makes sense because they don't have disadvantage in this. I wonder if they have categories of distance like they do in Pathfinder, where it's a -2 for this range, a -4 for this range, a -6 for this range, and so on. Example, if you use a ranged weapon power with a short bow, normal range 15, long range 30, you take a -2 penalty when attacking targets 16 to 30 squares away, and you cannot attack creatures further away than 30. So there's your answer. So in Pathfinder, and I imagine 3.5, you could go normal range 15, long range 30. It would say normal range 15, range increment 15. And so you'd go normal attack if they're within 15 squares, -2 if they're within 30 squares, 16 to 30 squares, -4 if they're within 31 to 45 squares, and so on. And you just keep doing that until it's pointless to attack because it's a -20. Which makes sense, like, logically, and like the realism of that makes sense. Like, you could try to attack someone way further away than normal, but you're unlikely to be able to hit them. Your aim is going to be way off, sort of thing. So it makes sense, but it also is just the addition of extra information, extra maths that you have to do and stuff that's like, yeah, get rid of it. The balance of realism versus game design. Ranged number. A ranged power that has a range expressed as a number can be used on a target within the indicated number of squares. So range. So melee 1. I think I misread. A melee power that has a range of 1 can be used only on an adjacent target. I think I read it as can be used only on one adjacent target, meaning the 1 was talking about how many targets you can hit with it. Whereas it was saying 1 because it's a range of 1, so you can only hit something with a range of 1. So then why would you need melee? If the 1 indicates melee, you don't need the word melee. Melee already indicates that it's an adjacent target. If they're not adjacent, it's not melee. What the fuck? I hate tautology. What? I hate redundant tautology. Melee 1. Why would you need the melee or the 1? Is there any circumstance in which melee could be? Because it says adjacent target. Are they not considered adjacent if they're within the halberd range? Melee attack power that has a range of weapon allows you to attack a target within the reach of the weapon you're wielding. Oh, okay. No, I'm with it. It does make sense. Right. Yeah, I'm with it. Okay. Most weapons are range 1. So melee 1 is most often redundant. But melee, if it was melee weapon instead, and you had a ranged weapon, a reach weapon, like a halberd, then you would not be able to use the halberd against a creature that was in melee 1, for a power that was melee 1. I don't think I said that right. If you have a power that's melee weapon and a power that's melee 1, and there is a creature 10 feet away, even if you have a halberd, you can't use the melee 1 against the creature that's 10 feet away. Because even though you've got reach, the power only happens to an adjacent creature, not within the range of your weapon. Yes, that makes sense. All melee 1 work for melee, not all melee works for melee 1. Yes, I think that makes sense, yes. And then with them saying melee 1 specifically, whereas ranged brackets number, they're indicating that ranged you probably get ranged 2, ranged 7, ranged 43. But melee 1, just putting melee 1 indicates that they probably never have melee 2. And that's probably because all weapons are 1 or 2 reach. But I would imagine that there would be some, or there would or should be some weapons that would be melee 3. Like a pike, or like a whip. A whip, I mean, you get like 40-foot whips in real life. They're really fucking hard to use, but I have seen videos of people using 40-foot whips. You can, like, if you have a whip that was reach 3, and you can hit someone 3 squares away from you, that would imply that we should have powers that are only melee 2. But it seems that there's only powers that are melee 1. Melee 1 our melee weapon. Anyway, ranged power that has an expresses a number can be using the target within the indicated number of squares. Makes sense. Ranged sight. A ranged power that has the range of sight can be used on any target within line of sight. You still need line of effect to the target. So you can see someone 3 miles away, and you can use a ranged power on them, even if you're not attacking with a weapon. Even if your weapon can't attack that far. Because it's not tied to the weapon, it's tied to the power. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Close. A close power creates an area of effect that originates in a square of your space, and most close powers can hit multiple targets. For details about how close attacks work, see page blah. So there's close burst and close blast. Close burst number, which we saw close blast number for the breathing thing. Close burst number we haven't seen yet. A close burst power allows you to target creatures or objects within the indicated number of squares from you in all directions. Bursting out from you. Close burst. That makes sense. See page blah for how to determine the area of a burst. I think that's probably worth jumping forward to now. 272. Area of effect. Close burst 1, wall 1, blast 3, blast 3. That makes sense, yeah. That's exactly how I thought it was, yes. Wall 6. That makes sense. Area of effect. Boom. So they're showing the this is a close burst 1, because it's 1 square out from you. This is a close blast 3, because it's a 3x3 starting from a point within your range. And then this is a wall 6, so it's like 6 pieces around you. That makes sense. Cool. I'm not going to go into all of reading about all of the details and stuff about it, but that's your area of effect stuff. Okay. Area burst number within number squares. Where was I? Close. Yeah, close. Close burst is within blah blah blah. Close blast power allows you to target creatures or objects within an adjacent area that is the indicated number of squares on all sides. Yeah, that makes sense. And then finally, area. An area power creates an area of effect that can originate in a distant square and hit multiple targets or creates an obstacle. For details about how area attacks work, use page blah blah blah. Area burst number within number squares. To use an area burst power, choose a square within the range indicated by the second number. The power affects targets in the square or within a number of squares equal to the first number. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's just burst. It's just blast. But you're just choosing, instead of choosing an adjacent square, you're choosing a square over there. No, it's burst. It's not blast. It's burst. It's burst, but instead of choosing your own square, you're choosing a square within X number of squares. So the furthest distance you can hit with an area burst is actually the 2 numbers added together. So if you've got area burst 3 within 10, you can hit someone 13 squares away by choosing the square 10 away and then counting 3 out from there. I think. Yeah, that makes sense. Area wall number within number squares. To use an area wall power, choose a square within the range indicated by the second number to be the wall's origin square. The first number represents the number of squares the wall occupies. All of its squares must be within its range. And then personal. A power that has the range of personal affects only you. That makes sense. Prerequisites or requirements. You must be trained... prerequisite, you must be trained in stealth. Prerequisites, requirements, you must be wielding a light blade. Certain powers are only usable if you meet a predetermined condition. Prerequisites, you must meet this provision to select this power. If you ever lose a prerequisite for a power, for example, if you use the retraining system to replace training in a skill with a different training in a skill, you can't use that power thereafter. Requirement, you must meet this provision to use this power. You can have the power in your repertoire, but it is not available unless you fulfill the requirement. Those are the same thing. Why muddy things by calling them different things? Those are the same thing. Prerequisite: you must be wielding a light blade. If you are no longer wielding a light blade, you lose the you cannot use that power. It's the same thing. Prerequisite and requirement, exactly the same thing. Why would they muddy things? Stupid. So an area wall is like a subset of area burst. Not necessarily, because area wall was that the example they used was putting a wall directly around them, but you don't have to put the wall next to you. You can put it within whatever your range is. The example they used was just area wall 1 within 1 square, so it had to be around them, I guess. One's permanent, one's more a condition of that moment. No, because they've said if it was permanent, they wouldn't have to use the caveat of if you ever lose it, you lose the associated power. If the prerequisite is for like you have to have training in a skill and you can retrain your skill, then you can lose it. It's not permanent. They've put an arbitrary. They have done basically what you're saying, but like completely arbitrarily. They've made some sort of line of like, oh, we'll call it a requirement because it's easier to lose the condition. You can put a sword away easier than you can retrain in a skill. Stupid. Target. If a power directly affects one or more creatures or objects, it has a target or targets entry. When a power's target entry specifies that it affects you and one or more of your allies, you can take advantage of the power's effect along with your teammates. Otherwise, ally or allies does not include you. There we go. We needed that clarification from earlier when you were talking about your half-elf and the group diplomacy that allows you to add a +1 circumstance check to racial bonus, to diplomacy checks if you're within 10 squares. So when it's specified allies, it is not yourself. Both terms assume willing targets, so allies are assumed to be willing. Enemy or enemies means a creature or creatures that aren't your allies, whether those creatures are hostile towards you or not. So if your ally is unwilling to be the target of a spell, like if you say, I'm going to cast Dimension Door on both of us and get us over there, and your ally's like, no, I don't want to go with you, they're no longer a willing target, which automatically makes them an enemy. They're friendly to you, they're still on your side, but because they are not willing target for the power, for the sake of the power only, they are considered enemy. That's interesting. Creature or creatures means allies and enemies both, as well as you. And then it doesn't specify object there, but pretty self-explanatory, I guess. Attack. Most attack powers that deal damage require you to make an attack roll. The attack entry specifies the kind of attack you make and which of the target's defenses you check against. If you have a modifier to your attack roll, that's mentioned here as well. Example entries are given above. Attack strength versus AC, attack charisma versus will, attack constitution versus fortitude, attack intelligence +4 versus reflex, attack dexterity versus AC, one attack per target. If your power can attack multiple targets, you make a separate attack roll against each target. Hit. Every power that requires an attack roll includes a hit entry, which explains what happens when an attack roll succeeds. Example entries are given above. Hit 1 (W) versus plus strength modifier damage. Hit 3d6 plus intelligence modifier force damage and the target is dazed until the end of your next turn. Hit 5d6 plus intelligence modifier acid damage and ongoing 10 acid damage (save ends). Hit, the target is immobilized, save ends. Blah blah blah, so on. I wonder what the W in brackets is, because they've got more examples. 2 (W). It's always following a set number rather than a number of d6 or a number of dice, and so the W stands for like a set number or a standing number or something. See attacks and defenses, page 269. Nice for how to make attack rolls. how to deal damage, and how to apply various effects, including conditions and forced movement. Ongoing damage is a fixed amount, rather than an amount determined by a die roll. Ongoing damage is applied to a target each round at the start of the target's turn until the target makes a successful saving throw. If a hit or effect entry contains save ends, or save ends both, the indicated consequence of the successful attack persists until the target makes a successful saving throw. If a hit grants you the ability to compel the target to move, whether through forced movement or teleportation, you can move it to any number of squares up to the number specified, or not move it at all, if you so choose. That last line is unnecessary because move it up to any number of squares. Move it a number of squares up to the number specified includes 0. 0 is up to that number. Some powers add modifiers to attack rolls or damage rolls. These modifiers apply to any roll of the dice, but not to ongoing damage or other static, non-variable effects. The Paladin's Wrath of the Gods prayer, for example, adds her charisma modifier to her and her allies' damage rolls until the end of the encounter. When her cleric ally invokes Flame Strike, the damage equals 2d10 plus Wisdom modifier plus the Paladin's charisma modifier fire damage and ongoing 5 fire damage. The ongoing damage doesn't increase because it's a static effect. Add to attack rolls, attack and damage rolls, yeah. Whenever you affect, that's the difference between rolling, just saying you take 5 damage and saying you take 5d1 damage. Because 5d1 would technically turn that into a roll, so you add things to it. So in my games, unarmed strikes, they don't just deal 1 plus your strength mod, they deal 1d1 plus your strength mod, turning it from a flat 1 to a roll, which means that you can benefit from critical hits, and anything that specifies on a damage roll can now be applied to unarmed strikes in my games. Whenever you affect a creature with a power, that creature knows exactly what you've done to it and what conditions you've imposed. For example, when a paladin uses Divine Challenge against an enemy, the enemy knows that it has been marked, and that it will therefore take a penalty to attack rolls, and some damage if it attacks anyone else aside from the paladin. Interesting. So that is saying that you, unequivocally, the enemy will always know that you have targeted them with some sort of effect. Stretch. Fuck me. How much more have we got? Just these pages. 2 pages. We got this. Nice artwork there. Some sort of bugbear and a portal, perhaps? Applying a penalty. When a power description includes a wording such as a penalty to attack rolls equal to your charisma modifier, that means you subtract the value of your ability modifier from the result or the numerical quantity that's being penalised. If your ability modifier is not a positive number, it does not provide a penalty. So you can't apply a penalty of -1. So it applies a penalty of your charisma modifier, and you've got a -1 charisma modifier. Like, a penalty of -1 is a bonus. So it's not allowing that. It's saying no double negatives, no using negative pigs to pay for negative apples. Only 2 more pages. 2 hours later. Regaining hit points. Some powers allow you or someone else to regain hit points. Sometimes the recipient of this benefit needs to spend a healing surge, but if a power description includes the words "as if blank had spent a healing surge," then the beneficiary gains the appropriate number of hit points but does not spend a healing surge to do so. Hearing a lot about healing surges. I really need to look up healing surges, I guess. Do I do that now? Page 293. Yeah, let's jump ahead to healing surges. It's talking a lot about them. I need to know a bit about them, don't I? Healing in combat, healing surges. I'm not going to read all of this chapter. I'm just going to jump to the sidebar box about healing surges. Most healing requires you to spend a healing surge. When you spend a healing surge, you restore lost hit points to your current hit point total. Once per encounter, you can use your second wind to spend a healing surge and heal yourself. That makes sense. So I was saying, why are they different? You have a number of times that you can healing surge, but your second wind is a once per encounter that you can only do to use a healing surge. That makes sense. After a short rest, you can spend as many healing surges as you like outside of combat. You can spend a limited number of healing surges per day. When you take an extended rest, your number of healing surges is replenished. Some powers, either your own or those of another character, allow you to heal as if you'd spent a healing surge. When you receive such healing, you don't actually spend the healing surge. Number of healing surges. Your class and constitution modifier determine how many healing surges you can use. Healing surge value. When you spend a healing surge, you regain 1/4 of your maximum hit points, rounded down. This number is called your healing surge value. You use it often, so note it on your character sheet. This is very much just your hit dice situation. So they replaced healing surges with hit dice, it seems. So you have 10 hit dice. You can use one of your hit dice as a second wind. And then on a short rest, you can use as many of them as you want to regain hit points. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just hit dice. Healing surges is just hit dice. Monsters and NPCs. As a general rule, monsters and non-player characters have a number of healing surges based on their tier. 1 healing surge at heroic tier, 2 healing surges at Paragon tier, 3 healing surges at epic tier. Healing in combat. Even in a heated battle you can heal. You can heal yourself by using your second wind. An ally can use the heal skill, and an ally can use a healing power on you. When a power heals you, you don't have to take an action to spend a healing surge. Even if you're unconscious, the power uses your healing surge and restores hit points. And some healing powers restore hit points without requiring you to spend a healing surge. Okay, that makes sense. We're back. We're back to where we were. It's the beauty of in-text references. You can make your document as long as you want. Yeah, because you'll just go, let's jump ahead to where it's saying that and then jump back. But if a power description includes the words as if I'd spent a healing surge, blah blah blah, we read that bit, within X squares of you. When this language appears in a power description, treat the effect it refers to as a close burst for the purpose of determine line of effect. Duration. Most powers take effect and then end. Their effects are instantaneous, perhaps as brief as a single swing of your sword. Some powers last beyond your turn, however, for instance, until the end of the current encounter or until the end of your next turn. If you use a power outside of combat, it lasts for 5 minutes unless otherwise noted. Durations are discussed in more detail on page 278. So if you use a power outside of combat that would normally be until the end of your next turn, it's gone from lasting 6 seconds to 5 minutes, which is quite a significant increase. Rob's still on. I fell asleep. I'll be on for some time, probably Cinderfingers. This is a big book and I want to get through as much of it as I can before I go on holiday in 3 weeks' time. I will be going on a brief break to get some food and probably get dressed in about 1 page's time, which may be another 30 minutes. Alright, miss. Sometimes the dice are against you and you miss your target. Missing isn't always the end of the story, however. A miss can indicate a splash effect, a glancing blow, or some other incidental effect of a power. Examples of some typical miss entries are given above. Miss takes half damage. Miss takes half damage and no ongoing fire damage. Miss takes half damage and the target is not pushed or immobilized. Half damage. When you calculate half damage, remember to apply the rule about rounding down. If a damage roll produces a result of 1, half of that damage is 0. So you can do a damage of 0 if you are doing just 1 damage and the person has resistance. Interesting. Secondary target and secondary attack. Some powers allow you to make secondary or even tertiary attacks. The power description indicates if you can make such an attack after the previous attack was a hit, if that attack was a miss, or regardless of whether the previous attack hits or misses. Unless otherwise noted, the range of a secondary or tertiary attack is the same as for the attack that preceded it. Effect. Until the end of your next turn, the target's attack rolls against you take a penalty equal to your wisdom modifier. Blah blah blah. Bunch of examples. Many powers produce effects that take place regardless of whether your attack roll succeeds and other powers have effects that occur without an attack roll being required. Example entries given above. You gain temporary hit points equal to blah blah blah. The effect of powers are as varied as the powers themselves. Some effects impose a condition on the power's target, other effects provide a bonus or benefit for you or your allies, or a penalty for enemies. Still others change the nature of the battlefield or create something that didn't exist a moment ago. Two kinds of powers, conjurations and zones, produce distinctive effects that are governed by special rules. Conjurations. Powers that have the conjuration keyword create objects or creatures of magical energy. Unless a power description says otherwise, a conjuration cannot be attacked or physically affected, and allies of the conjuration's creator can move through the space the conjuration occupies, but enemies can't. A conjuration uses your ability scores and defenses to determine the outcome of attacks it makes and attacks against it, if such attacks are possible. Environmental phenomena and other forces have no effect on a conjuration unless a power description says otherwise. For example, a conjuration that produces an icy hand functions in a fiery volcanic cavern without penalty. If a power allows you to move a conjuration at least one square... If a power allows you to move a conjuration, at least one square that the conjuration occupies must remain within the power's range. If you move far enough away from a conjuration that is no longer in range, its effect ends immediately. If a conjuration's creator is slain, the conjuration immediately ends. That makes sense. Zones. The zone keyword applies to powers that create lingering effects that extend over an area. For example, some zones create terrain effects, such as difficult terrain or scorching fire that harms anyone who enters it. Zones cannot be attacked or otherwise physically affected unless a power description says otherwise. If zones overlap and impose penalties to the same roll or score, creatures in the overlapping area are subjected to the worst penalty. The penalties are not cumulative. Additive, I think, should be the correct usage there. Cumulative maybe works. Similarly, a target in the overlapping area takes damage from whichever zone deals the most damage, regardless of the damage type. Oh, interesting. So if you have a zone of something that deals fire damage, and you have another overlapping zone of something that deals radiant damage, and a creature that is immune to fire damage is in the overlapping zone, but the fire damage happens to be dealing more damage than the radiant, the creature takes no damage. They don't just ignore the fire and then take the radiant. If you're in a zone of something that does 10 fire damage and a zone of something that does 8 radiant damage, and you're immune to fire, you take no radiant. That seems stupid. Environmental effects, attacks, and other forces have no effect on a zone unless a power description says otherwise. For example, a zone that deals fire damage is in no way diminished by a power that deals cold damage. If a power allows you to move a zone, at least one square of the zone covering must remain within the power's range. If you move far enough away, it ends immediately. If you are slain, it ends immediately. Unless otherwise specified, a zone fills a power's area of effect. Use the standard rules for areas of effect to determine which square it fills. Alright, last paragraph. Here we go. We're on to something. We're almost there. You can potentially protect an ally by doing another damage spell to the area. Yeah, if your ally was stuck in an area that's doing acid damage to them every round, and they for whatever reason can't get out, maybe they're shackled or they're paralyzed or something, and you know that ally through whatever spell is immune to a particular type of damage, or you have a spell that can make them immune to a type of damage. That could be a real double team. They're in an area that's doing acid damage. You've got a spell that can make them immune to fire. And you're like, I can't make them immune to acid, but I can make them immune to fire damage. You can turn to your other wizard ally and say, hey, cast a firestorm on them. And they're like, what, are you fucking kidding? And you're like, no, trust me. Boom. Immune to fire damage. You cast firestorm on them. They're now in 2 overlapping zones, taking a shit ton of fire damage, but they're immune to it, so they take none of the acid damage. That's stupid. That is stupid. Find something for him to rant about so he doesn't stop streaming. I'm not going to stop streaming. I'm going to finish this page and then I'm going to pause, take a break, go get some food, get dressed, and then I'm going to come back and keep reading because I am probably going to be reading most of this day, I imagine. It's going to be a long stream. I've got a lot of stuff to get through with this book and I haven't even started on classes yet. And I really need to get through as much of this book as I can, if not all of it, before 3 weeks from now when I give it back to its rightful owner. This is definitely how physics works. It's how magic works. Sustain. If a power has a sustain entry, you can keep that power active by taking a specified type of action, minor, move, or standard, during your turn. The sustain entry tells you if a power has the effect that The sustain entry tells you if a power has an effect that occurs when you take the action to sustain it. See durations for more sustaining powers. For instance, sustain minor, the zone persists. Sustain minor, you slide the target 1 square whether you hit or miss. Sustain move, you can sustain this power until the end of the encounter or for 5 minutes. Sustain standard, you remain invisible as long as you don't make an attack. And so on. And with that, we are up to page 60 and the start of the cleric class. We're doing well. The class pages. Jesus fucking Christ. The class pages. Fucking hell. Fucking fuck. Fuckity fucking. The class page. I'll get there. The class pages. Jesus fucking fuckity cunt. There you go. The class pages are only 115. They're only 116 pages. We've only got 115 pages to read. It's taken us 2 several-hour streams to get to page 60. But there's only 100 and something pages of class. It's fine. We can get through that today. We started today's reading. We started today's reading on page 32 and got to 60. So we're averaging about 30 pages per stream. And the stream is what? So currently we've been streaming for 5 hours. And I think I did about the same last time, right? It was about 5 hours, give or take. So it's about 30 pages every 5 hours that I'm reading. So to read 180 pages, let's say, is 6 times 5 hours. It's 30 hours. It's another 30 hours of streaming to get just through classes. If I continue reading at the rate that I'm doing. However, I will tell you, a lot of those pages, as I just saw from flipping through them, was about your daily exploits, your utility exploits, your spells, your prayers. It was just outlining a whole bunch of spells. This is not only the class spell, the class list. Unlike in the 5th edition handbook, they didn't just outline your class features and then spells as an entire 2 other chapters in the book. They've rolled your spells into your class things. So like in the wizard, for instance, it's got a whole bunch of all of the spells. Basically, you go through every one of the spells that you have access to in order to understand the wizard. And we're not going to do all of that. I'm just going to read the spell. I'm just going to be like, oh yeah, that's that, and then we'll move on. So the page count will start speeding through once we actually get into it, hopefully. Hooey. All right. I'm going to send you to a be right back. I'm going to be some amount of time, at least 10 minutes, probably closer to 20. I'm just going to go get some breakfast. Maybe by this point it's 2 p.m. So probably not breakfast. I probably should actually get lunch so that I don't confuse my body too much. I'll probably go get some lunch. I'll go reheat what I made for dinner last night, which was some sort of pork schnitzel something or other. I'll go have that and I'll get dressed and I'll see you in about 20 minutes or something. Make sure you're doing your laundry and whatever else you need to be doing. Walk the dog. If you can't stick around for another 20 minutes and you're going to go to bed, that's fine. Or go to work or whatever. I'll see you in the VOD later. Bye.
Hi there. If this is the first video you've watched of my stuff, check out more videos over here. I do D&D related content all the time.